In the opening scene, a futuristic train carrying an elite team of fighters on a mission speeds along the train tracks on the moon at high velocity. Throughout the journey, the fighters stay focused as they quietly await their arrival in lunar civilization, with some using holographic computers while others catch some rest. One of them, our main character, Jack Shadow, hums a tune to pass the time, and when asked how he knows the song, he replies he isn't sure. Before long, they reach a criminal checkpoint on the highway, and immediately, the train's operator receives a terror alert message instructing all the fighters to prepare for a fight. As the criminals launch their attack on the train, Jack and his teammates spring into action, taking down as many robotic criminals as possible to prevent their train from derailing. Soon, robots on top of the train start hacking into its operational system, and the operator quickly informs Reese about the risk of derailing. With no time to waste, she gives instructions to the others to protect the train at all costs, and both Jack and Dwan jump out of the train to fend off the robotic attackers. Once on top of the train, Jack employs the engraving technology in his suit to create a plasma gun, using it to shoot down numerous robots chasing the train. Unable to provide an accurate count of the enemies, the operator warns the fighters that it's a kill or be killed situation. So, Dwan, Jorg, and Reese team up to eliminate all robots harming the train. Eventually, Reese climbs aboard the train to join Jack in fighting off the surrounding robots. Choosing to block out all worries and fully concentrate on the battle ahead, Jack boosts his engraving and goes all out against the attacking robots. Before continuing the main story, a flashback is presented to clarify the events leading to the war-torn future between Earth and the Moon. About a year before the train incident, a calm Jacob Shadow is seen lying in the grass of his garden, reminiscing about a traumatic experience from his childhood. He recalls having a friend named Phil, with whom he would often play in a strange facility they were both in. His last memory of Phil is a poignant one, where Phil sacrificed himself to ensure Jack escaped the burning facility alive. After this, Jack stands up, remembering it's Meatloaf Night, and drives his supercar to the team's meeting spot in Los Angeles, all while listening to news about a soccer parade in the moon's capital city, Copernicus. When he finally arrives, his butler, Harry, hurriedly welcomes him, and Jack enters the house to find an angry Reese, who scolds him for being late to their meeting. Disinterested, Jack tosses her a drink, brushes her off, and moves on to chat with Jorg, Michaela, and Eric, asking them about their progress in a certain game they're playing. Eventually, he questions Reese why she's there on Labor Day, leading to an even larger tantrum as she panics over the ship leaving without them. To help keep her calm, Jack and his friends take the family chopper to the cruise ship, soon joining everyone for a good time. Soon after, the orbital shaft that the Shadow Corporation is about to launch gets prepped for takeoff, and the event kicks off as soon as the cruise ship docks with the shaft. At the start of the event, Jack's mom welcomes the audience and begins her speech by highlighting all the great things the unified AI system, Sapientia, has accomplished since its inception. She gradually transitions into discussing the moon exploration project, and mentions that this will be the 40th orbital shaft they're building. When it's time to introduce the launch, Jack's mom makes a dramatic move to present her son to the public, only to realize he's missing from his seat. Turns out, Jack sneaked out to hit the casino with Ozma and Jorg. As they rack up their winnings, they tease Ozma, whom they view as too uptight, even suggesting a girl for him to spend his earnings on. Ozma gets to enjoy some attention from a woman again, but before Jack's good mood can last, Reese appears, fuming, and pulls Jack aside to ask what his plans are, since she can't fathom why he's not taking life seriously. Jack tries to dodge the question at first, but Reese gets fed up and leaves after reminding him to give his mom the gift he bought for her. Before long, Jack heads to their private apartment on the cruise ship and bumps into his dad on the way to the dining room. After some small talk, Jack's father gives him advice on life choices and warns him to take Reese seriously, suggesting she could be a good wife someday. Once they reach the dining room, they're hit with the smell of meatloaf, making them hungry. Unfortunately, they find Jack's mother, Mona, drunk and rambling about Jack leaving the event early and his relationship with Reese. When she starts implying that Jack and Reese slept together, Jack's dad pulls her aside to take her to bed. Before leaving, he asks Jack if he's worried about being adopted, considering he usually seems carefree, but Jack replies that he just doesn't believe he's right for whatever they need him for. Jack's father encourages him not to worry about what others say and just trust his parents to provide him a great life. Around this time, Mona becomes more unruly, forcing Jack's dad to leave. A few minutes before midnight, Reese finds Jack on the cruise ship deck, staring at the gift he bought for his mom's birthday, and asks if he's ready to give it to her this year. He says yes, and Jorg, Eric, and Ozma join them, chatting about how much money Ozma has lost that night and throughout the year. In his defense, Ozma points fingers at Sapientia for his losses, claiming it will help humanity, but everyone knows that's nonsense. Finally, when the clock strikes midnight, the fleet of cruise ships goes dark, and all passengers turn their attention to the launch of the 40th orbital shaft as power from the moon activates the systems. Suddenly, a series of bright golden lights illuminate the base of the orbital shaft and shoot into the sky, leaving the spectators, including Jack and his friends, in awe. For a few moments, everything seems normal, but then the lights suddenly go out all around Earth. Before Jack or anyone can figure out what's going on, Jack gets hacked. Unable to do anything about about it, Jack gets pulled into a cosmic holographic space where he encounters his long-lost buddy, Phil, inching closer to him. Just as Phil is about to touch him, the whole space turns red, and something starts pulling Phil back to where he came from. Before disappearing, Phil urges Jack to lend him his strength to fight for the moon, then vanishes. When Jack finally comes to, he mutters Phil's name to his friends, who ask what's wrong. Without wasting time, Jack ignores them and rushes back to the deck to look at the blacked-out orbital shaft. Soon, some cyan lights flash around it, and knowing trouble's brewing, Jack pulls Reese and his confused friends out of harm's way. Seconds later, a massive explosion rocks the sky, reaching the orbital shaft and nearby cruise ships. What was meant to be a peaceful launch night quickly becomes chaotic as falling debris starts destroying ships and knocking people out, including Jorg. In the midst of all this, Jack decides to save anyone he can find, but Ozma, not wanting his friend to walk into danger, stops him and throws him, Reese, Eric, and Jorg into an escape submarine, sealing it just before the head of the orbital shaft crashes into the water, causing a final explosion that destroys the cruise ships. With Jack and some friends safely off the cruise ship, he looks out the window and watches a huge pile of debris crash into his parents' cruise ship, leading to their untimely deaths. At the same time, on the moon, citizens are protesting against Earth's interference in their lives. Soon, the leader of the rebellious moon group, Bob Skylum, aka the Moon's Devil, appears to everyone, including those on Earth, to send a holographic message claiming responsibility for the collapse of the 40th orbital shaft, vowing to never again let Earthlings colonize and terrorize them. Just before ending the message, he declares it the moment of independence for the moon, getting the entire moon population to chant the name of his terrorist organization, Moonrise. By the end of his message, a certain woman is seen chilling and watching the holographic message, as if waiting for something to happen next. A few hours after the explosion, Jack is rushed to a nearby hospital for immediate medical care. Thankfully, he regains consciousness soon after, but when he wakes up, he leaves his hospital bed and the gift he bought for his mom's birthday and rushes out of his room to search for his friends right after seeing the extent of the explosion's damage. On his way, he finds a staff member and asks if anyone else was brought in besides him, but unfortunately, the staff says he's the only one they've seen so far. Hearing this, Jack walks around the hospital grounds and finds several dozen people wounded and receiving urgent medical attention. At this point, he knows his home in Los Angeles is gone for good. On his way home, he recalls what the staff told him about even Sapientia, not knowing about the status of his people, but he remains hopeful. When he finally gets home, he grabs a drink and, while wearing an arm sling, tries to contact everyone he's affiliated with, including his friends, but unfortunately, he can't connect with anyone. After quickly recalling the incident and the last looks on his parents' faces, Jack tries to reach out to his buddies again, especially Reese and Eric, but still, to no avail. Tired of failing, he accidentally spills his drink and pulls up a holographic screen to check the news. There, he re-listens to the message from the Moon Devil from 9 days ago and realizes just how chaotic things are at the moment. Before he can hear the rest of the news, two men in black suits show up with his mother's gift and take him away. It turns out the Joint Army suspects him of helping the Moon Devil with his act of terrorism on Los Angeles soil, as well as the orbital shaft attack. Right now, it's said that he'll be held at the Joint Army HQ in Nevada for further investigation, and then brought to trial once evidence is found. So, without realizing it, Jack is driven to a facility hidden deep in the desert and thrown into a detention cell to wait until the person in charge arrives. Confused about why he's being detained, Jack struggles with his handcuffs and asks the men why they're treating him like a criminal. At this point, the men, who have been holding back their anger, accuse him of being the person suspected of orchestrating the joint terrorist attack and beat him up. As soon as they leave, Jack tries to remind them that he's Jacob Shadow, the guy they all know and hate, but no one does anything. Around this time, Reese, posing as the psychological assessment personnel and lawyer for Jack, shows up with her assistant at the facility to do a psychological analysis on her friend. As she and her colleague walk toward the holding cell, Reese asks the man to buy her as much time as he can so she can get the full picture from Jack, and the man promises to do his best. As soon as she enters Jack's holding cell, she stops any physical contact and states the charges against him, noting that the Joint Army is trying to prove he's a criminal. Knowing she's right, Jack tells her he got hacked by someone and that it isn't his fault, but then Reese tells him that the Joint Army will pass judgment based on a complete review of what he and the people around him remember from the night of the attack. When Jack throws another fit, Reese delivers even more bad news. It seems his genetic screening was falsified long before he was adopted, making him look even more guilty in the eyes of the law. At this point, Reese says that even though it seems his parents don't know about this, there's a possibility his genes mutated at some point in his life after his adoption. With that, Reese reminds him that she's just grasping at straws and doesn't know the full story yet. Seeing she can still intervene in the case, she begs Jack to trust her and tell her everything she needs to know so she can defend him. Although Jack insists he didn't play any part in the terrorist attack, he does know the man claiming to be Bob Skylum, as he was raised by that jerk before being adopted. If anything, he tells Reese that he spent his childhood in a strange facility, and though she's a bit shocked to hear this, she calmly listens to what he has to say. So, Jack's childhood story starts on an ordinary day when Bob Skylum, who was his handler at the time, woke him up. Every time little Jack woke up, Bob would ask him if he liked the world he was in, and Jack would say yes every single time. time. On this particular morning, Jack was no different as he snapped awake, realizing he was late, and quickly rushed to the assessment room with his buddy Phil to complete their final assignment. Even though he tried his best to finish first, Jack ended up losing to Phil once again. Frustrated, he threw a tantrum and, while running to the cafeteria, asked Phil why he was late to bed the night before. Unable to explain at that moment, Phil promised to tell Jack everything better by nightfall and then played with his junior colleagues in the cafeteria before eating. Then, Bob Skylum, the man they all called Dad, showed up and inspired them to keep striving to become revolutionaries for the moon's future. Just as he was about to leave, one of them, Sophie, jumped at him, begging him to stay with them for the day. Sadly, Bob couldn't do that, so he left them in Phil's care and went to a strange room that only Phil noticed. Later that day, while Phil and Jack were hanging out with the others on the moon's grounds, Phil suddenly got curious and asked Jack how long they would be staying in that facility and what the moon revolution stuff was that Bob kept talking about. Before Jack could reply, someone called them both to remind them it was time to head back to the facility. With their conversation cut short, the duo returned to the degassing chamber to clean up before bed. An hour after lights out, Jack snuck a carton of milk and then noticed Phil staring at a big black door that was only meant for their father, so he joined him. At that time, Jack never questioned why they were forbidden from using the door. He just thought it was normal, even though they were allowed to play freely. Anyway, by midnight, Phil and Jack stayed up listening to the familiar hum coming from a small radio Phil had. According to older Jack, who's narrating the story, they were happy and had no worries at all, but in a minute, everything changed for the worse. In the flashback, little Jack reminded Phil about what he wanted to tell him earlier that morning, but before Phil could say anything, there was an explosion in the facility and the boys rushed outside to see what happened. Weirdly enough, Phil found the big black forbidden door open and somehow convinced Jack, who was a bit hesitant, to go through it. After running a few meters down the corridor, they saw a room they had never seen before, and inside was a big red hole that led directly outside onto the moon grounds. Soon after, they spotted a gun on the floor and found Sophie buried beneath a body, only to realize she was never human but a robot all along. As the reality set in, their supposed father, Bob Skylum, appeared, unexpectedly cut Jack's right arm for no reason, and went crazy when Phil tried to understand what was going on. Eventually, Bob abandoned the kids and stormed out of the facility in a frenzy. The boys managed to make their way toward the facility's exit to survive, but as they were leaving, Phil assured Jack that he knew the world they'd been living in was all a lie. Before leaving, though, Phil pushed Jack against the door, cut off his arm, and had his robot assistant attach it to Jack's severed right hand. After urging Jack to survive for him, Phil vanished, and that was the last time Jack ever saw him, as he alone escaped the terrible incident. After landing on Earth the next day, Jack is discovered near the ocean bank by a couple who eventually save him and adopt him a few months later. Everything that follows is pretty straightforward, but as the current Jack finishes telling his story, his prosecutor, Prosecutor Landry, enters the detention cell and has the men in suits take Jack into custody for safekeeping until Sapientia decides on his trial. Before leaving, Landry tells him he's authorizing another genetic screening on Jack since his genetic information has been expertly tampered with. Fearing they might uncover something they're not supposed to, Jack freaks out but is quickly restrained by the armed men in suits. About a year into his detention, Jack goes on an undercover mission to the moon's most populated city, Copernicus, to investigate the rebel group there. As they ascend to the moon through the orbital shaft, Reese warns him not to do anything suspicious, but Jack cracks jokes, which annoys Reese and leads to another meltdown. Eventually, Jack gets serious and promises to behave this time, but they end up arguing about what Reese will do once they order Jack's execution. Meanwhile, the other crew members suggest Inanna should just ignore the antics and stick to her briefing. As the VC-3 Reconnaissance Assault Unit, Inanna informs everyone that their main mission is to infiltrate the terrorist organization, Moonrise, and eliminate its leader, Bob Skylum. So far, Jorg mentions something about Sapientia not reaching certain parts of the Undercity, but Inanna corrects him, saying if the AI unification system can pinpoint the Moonrise Army's hideout, they won't be needed. For now, though, she and Reese note that the Joint Army has sent a task force to set up a search base around Copernicus, and they're supposed to meet with them as soon as they land. After mentioning several suspected hiding spots, the task force approaches the landing dock in the moon's orbital shaft. As the VC-3 assault unit approaches the moon's orbital shaft, Bob Skylum, who was called to the main gate earlier, gears up his troops for an attack on Copernicus City's nerve center. Once he successfully penetrates and takes control of the complex network keeping Copernicus running, Bob's team works hard to hack into Unit 5 to secure the area and get what they came for. Meanwhile, Bob himself, equipped with an artificial E2 material hand, strolls into the control room, disregarding all safety protocols meant to protect against hackers and terrorists, and confronts the overweight supervisor responsible for the facility's operation. After instructing his hackers to disable the emergency alarm system for the control room, Bob forces the boss to comply and accesses the mainframe database with his artificial arm to see what's been happening in Copernicus City. After tinkering with their systems for a few minutes, he's impressed by what he discovers. So far, the guy in front of him is capable enough to take the city's defenses seriously, and Bob makes sure the guy knows how impressive his defense systems are. Unfortunately, the guy is an arrogant jerk and brags that he was handpicked by the AI, Sapientia, to lead the nerve center and has full control over the system. Annoyed by the guy's rambling, Bob Skylum blows his brains out and continues to steal information from the city. About an hour later, Reese's team learns of the Moonrise infiltration and quickly worries about their landing strategy. With the city's orbital shaft compromised and their mission at stake, Reese and Zoan, Inanna's sister, discover a railway system leading to Copernicus's Undercity, prompting them to abandon their main route for this alternative. Just then, Jack screams in frustration over losing a game, and despite Eric's warnings about them being exposed on a pirate network, he reassures him that everything is alright. Eventually, the Moonchain airspace radar spots them and instructs them to identify themselves before landing, indicating they've just been caught off guard by the least informed member of their group. With no time to waste, Reese tells her team to stay alert and prepare for a confrontation with Copernicus forces amid the chaos. With that, she gestures to Zoan, urging her to get ready, and almost immediately, Zoan pilots the ship toward the base, making the captain and his crew see them as a threat. Just as the captain is about to give instructions to the base personnel, Zoan hijacks their signal, cutting off communication, and buys the others time to silently infiltrate the orbital shaft's base, taking out as many soldiers as they can. Jack gets first dibs on taking down the smallest enemies. Once he's done, he signals the others, and before long, Zoan lands their jet on the orbital shaft without being noticed. Meanwhile, Bob and his group of mercenaries relax after finally breaching the nerve center and gathering enough energy to activate something they call the L zone. With this much energy, Doctor, the most tedious member of the group, suggests they might be able to turn the tide of the war on the moon in their favor. Fed up with her monologue, the Wild One, another lady mercenary, talks about going out for food but stops when she receives news about a communications failure at one of their outposts. Even though everything's back to normal, she insists they should send drones to check the area to ensure they aren't being infiltrated, leaving Bob uncertain. In the meantime, Jack and his VC3 buddies visit the nerve center right after landing to scout for possible train routes to the Undercity of Copernicus. While Zoan figures out the train route, Duan leaves Jack to check something, and Eric is seen being overly cautious in the eerily quiet environment. Just seconds later, an unmanned enemy attack fleet approaches the base, alerting the VC3 assault team to abandon their ship and forcing them to retreat to rendezvous at Point Charlie since Zoan can't hack into their systems. Soon after landing, dozens of attack robots fan out to cover exits and surround the intruders. When Jack learns from Eric that they've been ordered to abandon ship, he hesitates, trying to get Eric to follow him so they can retrieve the ship. Just as he finishes speaking, the robots attack him, leading Jack and Jorg to act as decoys for the robots, while Eric and Duan search for an escape route. With Eric and Duan out of the picture, Jack and Jorg focus on holding off the attack robots, completely unaware that Bob Skylum and his right-hand man, Harbinger, are just a few meters away, watching the fight and figuring out who they are. When the duo spots the boys using engraving technology, Bob becomes interested in taking them on, so he asks Harbinger for help. Just as Jorg and Jack are about to make their escape after taking down the robots, a large structure gets thrown their way and crashes next to them. Before they can figure out what it is, the structure explodes right in their faces, separating them from each other, and soon, Bob Skylum appears next to Jack and challenges him to a duel. Realizing who he's up against, Jack uses his engraving tech to create guns and tries his best to land a fatal shot on the most infamous terrorist ever, but Bob blocks all his shots like it's nothing. Still, Jack refuses to back down, firing as many shots as he can while reloading expertly. Meanwhile, Reese notices Jack's stress levels and begs Jorg to intervene before Jack ends up harming himself. Just before Jorg can step in, Jack finds himself trapped in an arm lock by Bob's prosthetic hand after attempting to stab him with his engraved knife. Bob then uses the same engraving to deactivate Jack's tech and puts him in a dangerously threatening position that could easily get him killed. Thankfully, just when the criminal is about to blow Jack's head off, Jorg swoops in and pulls Jack out of the way just in time. Realizing they need a distraction, Jorg tosses a smoke grenade to cover their movements and then makes a run for their ship with Jack. When Bob finds them, he orders the robots to shoot at the ship to take it down, with one even firing rockets. But luckily for the boys, they manage to get the ship out of the loading dock before it gets blown to pieces. Just when they think they're in the clear, Bob blasts their ship with a death ray gun, sending them plummeting back down at crazy speeds. However, before they hit the ground, Jorg pulls up on the yoke and levels the ship, eventually crashing it into a nearby mountain. Satisfied with the outcome of his test, Bob heads back to his ship and instructs one of his crew, Wiz B, to help him with something. Moments after the crash, Jorg and Jack rejoin the others in the secret train that the group is traveling in, and Jack throws a fit over his failure to take down Bob this time. Understanding his frustration, Jorg urges him to calm down, reminding him that he would have died if he hadn't come to save him. With that, Jack calms down and falls silent for the rest of the journey. Eventually, they arrive in Copernicus's Undercity and disguise themselves as regular civilians to blend in. While riding a cable car to their contact's location, the group chats about the poor state of everything, especially the ridiculously high radiation radiation levels they're seeing and wonders if it's due to the recent orbital shaft collapse. Without any clear answers, they chill until they reach their destination and get off their ride. As they walk towards a nearby bar, a little girl on the street stops Jack and tells him he smells just like her big brother, but he ignores her and continues on to join the rest of his colleagues in the bar. They all hang out separately like regular people to avoid raising suspicion, but then Reese steps away from the gambling area to vent to Jack about Jorg and the others acting like idiots in the gambling den, while Jack is just relaxing on the balcony. After some small talk, Reese mentions that their contact is late for their meeting, and Jack suggests they're likely being extra careful to avoid getting caught, which makes sense. Reese agrees, but then checks if Jack is still upset about his fight with Bob the day before. When Jack says he's not, Reese calls him a liar, but Jack insists he's being truthful. After meeting the man who robbed him of his parents twice, he felt different. If it weren't for Reese and Jorg stopping him, he knows he could have died. Understanding this, Reese asks if he thinks his friend Phil is still alive. Jack can't say for sure and isn't even certain it was Phil. He saw the night everything started. Just as they're about to continue their conversation, Zoan and Jorg start fighting over Jorg being too generous. Eventually, when they break it up, they attract unwanted attention from the bar's patrons. But before anyone calls the cops, a big guy shows up and takes them to the back, where they go down a few levels in an elevator to reach the secret base beneath the bar. There, Jack meets the base commander, Harry Cox's old butler, and they reunite. After welcoming them and explaining the safety measures they took to ensure it was really them at the bar, Eric decides to call Zoan over, and he's escorted out of the meeting. Soon after, Harry tells everyone that Zoan is still officially missing, which actually works for the mission, but also reveals that most of the people working at this base don't have IDs either. Once again, Jorg asks a random question, and Dwan tells him that his foolishness is why Zoan was mad at him earlier. At that moment, there's a major tremor in the underground base. When Jack realizes the tremor is likely from an explosion in the bar above, he rushes to the elevator and goes up, only to find the whole bar ablaze, with Eric's charred body visible among some debris. In another flashback to before the VC-3 fighters left for their moon mission, Reese's group is seen running away from enemy forces, fully equipped with their E2 material suits and weapons. Suddenly, Jack gets hit by an enemy laser and falls to the ground. Afterwards, Jack undergoes a genetic screening to confirm that his genetic information is accurate this time, and not faked. Once cleared as a VC-3 assault fighter, he is escorted by Inanna and two prison guards into an elevator, which they ride down to a specific part of the facility. While in the elevator, Jack asks Inanna, who is on a video call with her sister Zoan, about his current status. After hanging up on her angry sister, Inanna tells Jack that his gender and assignment have now been decided. Before they reach the end of the ride, Inanna expresses her sympathies for the situation, leaving Jack even more confused than he was before. When they arrive at the base, Inanna leads Jack into the control room filled with screens and informs a large man near Reese that Jacob Shadow has been detained. Upon hearing this, the man orders his handcuffs to be removed and dismisses the guards. Jack then sees the mixed reactions on everyone's faces. They still see him as a criminal, even though all charges against him have been dropped as per Sapientia's orders. Eventually, they move past that, and the large man tells Jack that, although his genetic information was initially falsified, the recent genetic screening has cleared him for military operations on the moon, meaning he has type VC-3 genetics and has already been assigned to the assault team without him knowing. Shocked, Jack listens as another lean man explains the assault team's mission to eliminate Bob Skylum on the moon. Remembering the events that affected his parents due to Bob Skylum, he accepts the mission without hesitation. After Jack gives his approval, the big man calls Reese Major and informs everyone, including Jack, that she will lead the reconnaissance team. He wraps up the meeting and dismisses everyone. On their way back to their quarters, Reese apologizes to Jack for the delay in his release, blaming it on Prosecutor Landry's interference in her investigation. Jack brushes this off and then asks her about her parents, telling her how glad he is to see her doing okay. Noticing her sad expression, he quickly changes the topic to her new rank as Major. Reese smiles and explains that she was promoted based on the AI, Sapientia's recommendations, and mentions that Inanna, who is also behind them, was similarly recommended by the AI. When they reach the end of the corridor, Reese opens the door, revealing the other members of Jack's team. As the homesick guy recognizes Eric and Jorg, he calls their names and hugs them tightly as they all reunite for the mission. Seeing their excitement, Inanna asks Reese if she knows how many crimes they've committed, but Reese just ignores her and focuses on the boys. Soon, they start training, and their handlers set up a computer-simulated battle against Bob Skylum's forces on the moon. As they recreate the earlier scene before Jack's genetic screening, it's revealed that the battle takes place under the moon's gravity, so they need to adapt to fighting at 1/6 of Earth's gravity. As the simulation intensifies, more VC-3 members get hit by the laser guns, sustaining injuries. At one point, Jack uses his engrave system, a special program made from solidified digital signals called E2 material, which allows users to endlessly reprogram objects of the same mass into different materials, creating a plasma handgun to shoot at the enemy forces, while explaining that E2 is typically used during combat or stealth. Unfortunately, he isn't accustomed to fighting on the moon yet, so he gets hit multiple times and is eventually forced out of the simulation, screaming. Realizing he has failed, Jack throws a fit and storms out of the simulation room. Moments after doing some athletic exercises, Jorg and Ozma scold Eric and Jack for being twerps and not getting the simulation fighting thing right on their first try. In their defense, Eric says they still need time since that stuff is tough enough already. Once they get past that, they all decide to call it a day, but Ozma goes for another run to get his juices flowing. Shortly after he leaves, Jack lies on the grass, closes his eyes, and wakes up minutes later to find Zoan standing over him, demanding to know all the details about him being behind the orbital shaft collapse. Inanna tries her best to get her hacker sister off Jack so she can stop bugging him, but Zoan's thirst for knowledge turns out to be too strong. Eventually, another team member, a massive, quiet guy, picks her up like she's nothing and stares into her soul. Then he drops her, allowing Inanna to explain things to her younger sister. When Zoan hears what Inanna says, she shuts up and minds her own business. After that, Eric introduces everyone to Jack. Zoan, Inanna's level 4 imprisoned sister, and Duan, a level 5 death row inmate. Soon after, the team leader, Rhys, shows up to gather everyone for a brief meeting. Once everyone's there, she reminds them of their mission on the moon and informs them that during their 1-year training period, they'll share everything. Not just training, but also meals, beds, and other stuff to improve their teamwork and coordination. Zoan tries to protest this decision, but Rhys gets angry and tells them her decision is final. Right after snapping at Zoan, she asks if anyone has objections and is surprised when everyone agrees with her. Before the meeting ends, though, Jack and the others make sure to flatter her with compliments, and Rhys ends up blushing heavily. With the plan set, Team VC3 dives right into training, eating, sleeping, and bonding together over the next year to boost their teamwork. During one of their battle simulations, the team works hand in hand to not only evade enemy soldiers, but also counterattack and take them down. After training for the day, Jack and Eric talk about why their team was put together during their downtime. According to Eric, he feels that Sapientia chose them to be on the same team to keep each other in check and prevent anyone from running off. As he says that, he mentions something about losing everything, but then promises himself and Jack that no matter what happens, they'll protect what matters most to them. As Jack echoes what Eric just said, the flashback ends, and we return to the main story. Back in the present, a news report reveals that the explosion at the bar the night before was due to a suicide bomber, killing about 11 civilians and injuring 9 others. While Jack stares at the holographic screen in front of him, his memory takes him back to the moment he discovered that Eric Baker, his best buddy in the world, was lost in the explosion. Seconds later, Zoan shows up and invites Jack to follow them to Eric's funeral, but Jack chooses to stay behind and reflect on life. Satisfied with his response, Zoan and the others head to a church in the lower-level district of the city to attend Eric's funeral. Before they begin, Rhys thanks the head priest of the church for accommodating them on such short notice, but the priest assures her it's not a problem. While they talk, a young man with pink hair wearing a blindfold returns to the church, and the priest recognizes him immediately. After listening to Rhys's situation, the man, whom a group of kids call Phil, wishes her well and prepares to leave, promising to come back to see the kids. As soon as the priest wishes him well, he turns and walks out. At that same moment, Jack is seen in a bar with an empty glass, watching the game he and Eric used to play while he was alive. Once he gets his drink, the poor guy goes back to mourning his deceased friend, silently wishing there was something he could have done to protect him. As he stares at the screen, he recalls the same memory about them protecting what matters most, and stays quiet to continue mourning for Eric. Back at the cemetery, all the other VC3 members observe a minute of silence for Eric's passing. With Eric Baker's funeral procession done, Rhys returns to the Earthring station for an emergency meeting with her colleagues and superiors. So far, they've discovered that the man with pink hair, identified as Phil, has frequently been seen with the rebel army's commanders. Also, following the Copernicus battles, they've spotted him visiting the lower-level city, which is suspicious, to say the least. Even though they have no evidence to back this up, the team decides to start an investigation on him to figure out his endgame. A few days later, Harry takes Rhys and her team to see their latest invention, the Stingray, an E2 reinforced stealth spaceship. It's completely undetectable on radar and can navigate the toughest terrains. Plus, the E2 material is integrated into the aircraft structure, making it adaptable to any vehicle as long as the engine and mass remain unchanged. Even though the engine itself can't be fitted with the material, Harry points out that the sound suppression system should be quiet enough to keep them under the radar of most enemy detection systems, making it perfect for future missions of the VC3 assault team. After hearing all the great things about the new aircraft, Jorg, who has been curious the whole time, asks Harry what they're using the ship for. Rhys jumps in and explains that Earth's Joint Army plans to launch a full-scale attack against Copernicus's rebel army. She mentions that this is why it's been taking them so long to track down Bob Skylum's location. Rhys goes on to recall the day Bob had to face Jack and others on the front lines. Since then, she believes she has new intel on someone who has been frequently seen with Bob Skylum, and if they can catch this person, they can easily find Bob. So, for now, that's their mission. Rhys also tells her team that the Joint Army is already mobilizing troops, but capturing Bob Skylum will be tough, given how decentralized his organization is, which helps him hide. In any case, she warns them that General Pitter is on a warpath, yet still supports the two-pronged strategy they're following. However, if they don't capture Bob in time, they don't know how many lives could be lost to General Pitter's fury. To avoid a massive loss of life, Rhys urges her team to stay cool and wait for HQ to reach out. After After all that, everyone spreads out, and Jorg overhears Inanna and her sister, Zoan, discussing Eric's death. Zoan seems to think it's her fault, but Inanna tries to help her move past it. Then, Inanna tells Zoan that she can skip this mission if she's not feeling up to it, half joking that she'll send her back to prison if she disobeys. Just when Inanna asks Zoan to let her join the fight, Jorg steps in to chat with Zoan, giving them some space. Not long after Inanna leaves, Zoan shares her drink with Georg and asks why he came to the moon to put his life at risk for people who don't know him. When Jorg asks for clarification, Zoan reveals she knows he faked his screening results and that his parents are safe, so she can't understand why he'd willingly put himself in danger, unlike those detached from the real world. Before Jorg can respond, the scene shifts to Harry's bar and restaurant, where Duan is having dinner while Ozma struggles to eat. Noticing Ozma's reluctance, Duan asks about his kill count since arriving on the moon and reminds him they're at war, so he needs to kill to survive. This encourages Ozma to toughen up and start eating. Soon after, Inanna joins them for dinner from Harry's kitchen. Meanwhile, Rhys finds Jack, her love interest, in a dark area playing old games he used to play with Eric, and teases him about the situation's irony. After a light chat about their fallen friend, Rhys praises Jack for finally opening up since Eric's death. Jack tries to downplay it, but eventually admits that since the orbital shaft incident, something has changed inside him. With his best friend gone, he often feels like something is about to break. Luckily, with Rhys by his side, he feels safer than before. Hearing this makes Rhys shy, and Jack quickly shifts the mood. Nevertheless, Jack promises Rhys he won't let anyone else die, and touched by his words, Rhys stands up, holds his face, and leans in to kiss him. Unfortunately, just as they're about to share this moment, Rhys receives a call and heads back inside. Moments later, General Pitter mobilizes his battle spaceships from the Earth Ring shaft and sends them towards the moon to kick off the campaign. Realizing the big war is about to begin, the VC-3 assault team quickly gears up and pilots the Stingray, their new machine, from the loading dock to join the fleet after receiving Harry's blessing. In the meantime, Bob Skylum has one of his commanders, known as Doctor, prepare their large prototype for what's coming. Having fused seeds 2 and 3, the Doctor tells Bob that they only need seed 1's input to finally finish what they've been working on for ages. Hearing this, Bob asks his team for a little more time since he's already figured out the identity and location of seed 1. Before he can say anything else, they get an alert about the enemy fleet approaching Copernicus City, and after a bit of chatter, prepare for battle. When the enemy orders them to surrender, Robert, aka Bob, leaves the rest to handle things and goes to find seed 1. Just then, Harbinger asks why he's so eager to capture seed 1 himself, and Bob admits he doesn't know that yet. Regardless, he tells them not to worry since seed 3, with whom they made a contract, will be joining them soon. With that, the criminal team splits up and gets to work. In the next scene, while various battleships approach the Copernicus orbital shaft, civilians protest to send those ships back where they came from. Meanwhile, Rhys visits the church where they buried Eric earlier and quietly walks through the chapel to pray. Minutes after she arrives, Phil, the guy with pink hair, shows up and asks what she's doing there. Although she's surprised to see him, Rhys keeps her cool as he thanks her for helping evacuate the children before he arrived. Around this time, Zoan notices some issues with Rhys's comms and informs Jack and Jorg about it. Hearing this, they try to reach Rhys, but unfortunately, she's determined to fight the bastard in front of her. As she gears up, Phil tells her about the curse on the moonland, and then criticizes her suit and gear as if they were a plague on everyone's existence. To see if she's truly a threat to his cause, Phil gets his bionic prosthetic arm ready for a fight and challenges her. With everything set, Phil uses the engraving tech in his arm to send a strong signal that disrupts all electronics in the area. Before they know it, attack robots arrive on the scene and keep Jorg and Jack occupied. Once that's done, Phil knocks Rhys out with one hit, and Jack rushes inside only to find her unconscious. As the battle between both worlds begins, Duan and Ozma join Jorg to fight the enemy, but unfortunately, some robots attack and damage the Stingray, forcing Zoan to land. After making sure Rhys is okay, Jack faces Phil, who recognizes him, has Zoan activate zero gravity, and then attacks Jack with full force. After failing to hit Phil with a few shots, Jack realizes this guy fights just like Bob Skylum. After a brief pause and some discussion, Phil gets serious with Jack and shows him what real engraving looks like. Having dodged all his attacks, Jack charges at Phil and finally knocks off his glasses. At that moment, they lock eyes and stop fighting when they recognize each other from the past. Right after a brief but awkward silence, Phil flexes his prosthetic arm at Jack and shares how happy he is to finally be reunited with Jack after searching for him for so long. Remembering when Phil cut his right arm in the past, Jack puts the pieces together and realizes that Phil is not only Bob Skylum, but has also been the mastermind behind the Moonrise terrorist group all along. He struggles for a moment to understand how that's possible, but when Phil triggers a reaction in his right hand, morphing his form to look like Bob Skylum, Jack is convinced he's right. A few meters away outside the church, Duan, Ozma, and Jorg team up to fight and take down as many attack robots as they can. While they're at it, Inanna checks in with Zoan, who's busy checking the Stingray's engine status to see if things are alright. Once Zoan confirms they are, he happily uses the engraving technology on their spaceship to change it into something much smaller and better. Around the same time, Jorg and the others find themselves cornered. As they hold their ground against the bots, Jorg calls Jack and Rhys, hoping to get confirmation that they're okay. Realizing that the jamming signal is down, Jorg figures figures that Jack's radio silence means he's in trouble. With that in mind, he rushes into the church after asking Ozma to cover him. Inside the church, Jack is seen trying to process what he just discovered, bombarding Phil with questions. With so much to discuss, Phil bends down and politely offers for Jack to follow him. Unfortunately, before that can happen, Jorg bursts in and pulls Phil away from Jack. He then rushes to Jack, who's still confused, and after confirming Reese's location and health, urges Jack to focus so they can get Reese and escape the church before they get overwhelmed by the robots. Meanwhile, Phil climbs out of the hole he was pushed into and confronts Georg. Determined not to let Jack slip away this time, Phil angrily charges at Georg, who's ready to face him, unleashing his full power. Though it's risky to take on Phil alone, Jorg stands firm and tells Phil to get Reese out to safety in time. Soon after, Phil dodges Georg's bullets, grabs him by the face, and throws him out of the church. He then turns to Jack, smiling, and urges him to abandon his companions and follow him because they're meant to be together. With Jack seriously contemplating his life, Ozma crashes in through the church roof and engages Phil in hand-to-hand combat. At this point, Phil loses his cool and pushes Ozma aside, just like he did with Jorg. Unfortunately for him, Duan, who's right behind Ozma, shoots him with a laser blast, knocking him out for a few seconds. With Phil unconscious, the VC3 team gathers inside the church, including Jorg, and right after Jack apologizes and thanks them for their help, they walk out to figure out an escape route. However, once they get outside, they see an extremely angry Phil approaching with his robot army, warning Jack never to let the AI, Sapientia, control them again. Annoyed by Phil's remarks about the AI system, Jack and his team charge at Phil and his robot army to attack, and Phil, ready for battle, instructs his Seed 3 robot army to not let Jack and his friends escape. With the stage set, the battle between VC3 and the attack bots kicks off. Over the next few scenes, Jack and his buddies take down as many robots as they can to clear a decent escape route for themselves. When they realize the bots are just too numerous, Jord calls for backup Zoanand almost immediately. The skilled hacker drives a huge truck into the robot army, stopping only when she gets closer to her friends so they can jump in before it's too late. Once they're all safely inside the truck, she speeds toward the exit, and after nearly colliding with Phil, finally manages to escape onto the highway. Despite everything, the robots continue attacking them, and everyone does their best to fend them off. Just then, for no apparent reason, the robots suddenly drop dead, leaving Jorg, Jack, Duan, and Ozma in shock. Shortly after, Inanna shows up in the engraved Stingray vehicle and signals her sister. Upon receiving the signal, Zoan and the guys jump from the truck and land on the engraved train beneath it. After a successful landing, they make their way through the tunnels to freedom, leaving the truck and the robots to crash into another wall. When Phil sees the explosion in the distance, he realizes he's failed to capture Jack again, so he calls it in and moves on to other matters. In the meantime, the war between Earthlings and the Seed 3 bots kicks off, and since Bob Skylum's bots are on the losing side, Sylphie, the wild lady, suggests he return so they can figure out their next move. Shortly after, another member asks Bob about his little expedition, and Bob tells him that he finally found Seed 1. This news brings hope to his subordinates, as they realize the moment they've been waiting for is finally here. With that, Bob, aka Phil, hangs up the phone and walks away, promising himself to save Jack from Sapientia. Later that night, the Stingray train rolls along in silence, and Reese wakes up to find her team members feeling down and disconnected. Jack, meanwhile, is sitting outside on the train's back balcony, trying to figure out what happened to the kind and gentle Phil he used to know. Eventually, Reese joins him on the balcony, and Jack resolves to take care of things if he finds out Phil is actually Bob Skylum. Elsewhere, Bob and the other higher-ups in his organization discuss whether the 3 seed entities could be the key to peace or chaos. As soon as their meeting ends, we see the very first scene of this series play out again, meaning we're no longer in flashbacks and are back at the start, with the VC3 members inside the Stingray train, Jack humming a nice tune, everyone asleep, Zoan working on the computers, and Duan asking him about the song. Jack explains it's a tune he played often when he was a boy. Soon after, Skylum's robots attack their train, and the VC3 team members spring into action to protect their ride. Jack quickly gets on top of the train and shoots at as many attack bots as he can with his engraved weapon, saving them for just a little while. Eventually, the bots overwhelm the train, causing it to derail at a nearby moon junkyard. About a week later, a random girl walking through the junkyard spots the VC3 members by their train as they try to report back to HQ. Unfortunately, the signal's too weak for them to send a report, and Zoan suggests they move eastward to find a better signal. Before they can do that, though, Duan notes they might be there for a reason, and soon after, the girl from before calls out to them from her hiding spot. Meanwhile, Phil is humming the same tune he used to listen to with his buddy Jack when they were younger. When his trusty companion, Wiz B, shows up, he thanks the little bot for helping them take down the Joint Army's forces, and tells it he knows the AI is using Jack as bait to draw him in. Despite this knowledge, Phil stays committed to his mission to save his friend from Sapientia. Moments later, the VC3 team gives the random girl from earlier some of their food supplies, and the girl, thrilled at the prospect of not starving, thanks them for their help. When Reese asks what she's doing there, the girl explains she's looking for someone and has been searching through wrecks like theirs for a long time. Somewhere along the way, she mentions she lost her food supply, but thanks them again for their help. Just then, Jack stares at the wreck in front of him and suddenly recognizes it. Without saying a word, he heads toward the structure, prompting Reese and the girl to follow him, and only stops when he reaches the cafeteria he used to play in back when he was younger. To confirm his suspicions, he pushes further through a forbidden door, ignoring Reese and the girl, until he finally arrives at the room where he lost his right arm to the actual Bob Skylum. Eventually, he gets to a specific lab tank where he was kept and cleans off the label to reveal the name written there. Jacob Jefferson Skylum, a name the random girl knows belongs to the 50-year-old king of the moon. Realizing this is probably where he was born, Jack stays silent and continues to stare at the pod. At that moment, Reese receives a call from Zoan, urging her to get back on board to fight the approaching bots, and Reese immediately jumps into action, encouraging Jack and the girl, Mary, to follow her outside to take on the bots. As they leave the room, Jack gets extremely angry upon seeing the bots again and lunges at them with murderous intent. A few minutes later, an explosion goes off outside the damaged spacecraft, and Jack, Reese, and Mary all fall to their deaths. During their fall, Jack secures Mary, and by coordinating with Reese, manages to land all three of them on the engraved Stingray vehicle. Once the vehicle takes off, the remaining robots pursue it, but eventually, the VC-3 strike team escapes their clutches. A few thousand meters away, at the Joint Army Goddard base, a supply vehicle carrying escorts from Earth arrives to deliver some attractive women to the soldiers on base. When the vehicle stops, one of the women, Windy Silphone of Bob's commanders, stays behind to wait for the other escorts to be picked up by the soldiers. Once they're gone, she secretly exits the vehicle, looks over the entire base, mocks the pathetic frontline base, and waits for her delivery to show up. When it arrives, she makes a few calls to let others know she's at the designated point. Then, she eagerly places her right hand on the ground, trying to swipe some experimental creatures hidden beneath the base. Unfortunately, she hits a snag and causes an explosion that levels the place. Meanwhile, the VC-3 assault team is traveling away from the wrecked site with their new passenger, Mary, when she suddenly snaps and asks them to explain what just happened. After a moment of confusion and silence, Jorg lies to her, claiming they're a civilian research team sent from Earth by M. Atlas Corp, and that they encountered the monsters during their investigation, hoping desperately that she will believe him. After hearing a few more comments from the others, Mary ultimately decides to buy into the story, especially since they saved her life. To thank them, she takes off her mask, introduces herself, and promises to take them to the nearest town so they can relax and have some fun. About an hour later, Mary finds herself standing outside the train while the others hang out inside. Soon, Zoan tells her sister to go talk to Mary, suspecting she might be a spy from the enemy. Although Zoan could be right, Ozma and Jorg agree to give her a chance, thinking she might just be a regular person. In time, Reese, the team leader, decides to hang out with her for now. Once they finish that discussion, Duan asks Reese to tell everyone where they stand with everything that's happened. Reese gets straight to it and lists all their failures so far, which is a setback, to put it mildly. In any case, Inanna informs them they're approaching a mining town in the southern part of the Sea of Tranquility, according to Mary, so they should buckle up and get ready. Meanwhile, Jack reflects on everything that's happened up to that point. The pod with his name, Phil's involvement in the tragedies that hit him while posing as Bob, and wonders why he would even do something like that. As he delves deep into his thoughts, Reese snaps him back to reality so he can hear Inanna's review of what they know about Bob Skylum. After getting back on track, Reese advises they report to HQ and wait for their decision, simply because they don't have enough data to make independent choices. Around that time, Mary and Ozma spot the mining town on the horizon, and Jack, eager to relax, promises to meet his friend Phil again. Soon, they arrive in the southern mining town of Hypatia and quickly blend in with the locals by wearing casual clothes. Once in the market, Jack sneaks behind his teammates and heads into the market to buy some pricey lunar eggs. After purchasing them, he shows them to Mary, who scolds him for sneaking behind his team's backs to buy something so expensive. In his defense, Jack says he's never tried them before, so the cost doesn't matter. He thanks her again for helping them navigate the town's complicated layout, and Mary, accepting his gratitude, decides to hang out for a bit since she's not in a rush. Just then, they hear a mob protesting at a nearby popular structure, complaining about Sapientia and the Obst forces, who they believe are receiving money and weapons from the Joint Army. As the crowd starts chanting Bob Skylum's name, Jack looks around and sees a little girl innocently staring at the mob. With tensions rising, a drone shows up, jams the local communication signal, and clears the way for the Obst forces, who arrive afterward to take action. As soon as the Obst forces arrive, they open fire on everyone in the mob, including children, and Inanna and Jorg try to stop Jack from intervening since they're undercover. Before Jack leaves, he witnesses the tyranny of the Obst forces as they wipe out everyone, causing chaos and acting like nothing happened. With the threat neutralized, the captain of the attacking team spots the little girl Jack noticed earlier, carrying a jerry can filled with liquid. He approaches her, ignoring his subordinate coordinates warning that she might be a suicide bomber. When he finally reaches her, he offers her a chocolate bar in case she's hungry, but the girl slaps his hand away and bolts into an alley. Realizing she might be connected to the rebels, the captain's guards chase her into the alley to capture her, but soon get lost and leave when they can't find her. It turns out Jack was hiding in the alley. He pulls the girl into their hideout and only lets her go once he's sure the soldiers are gone. After freeing her, he tries to check her arm wound but discovers she has a prosthetic arm, just like Bob Skylum's, which she seems to cherish. Eventually, he smiles at her and asks if she has a home, making Mary smile at his kindness. When they return to the Stingray, Reese updates HQ on their status and talks to Zoan, who's busy trying to analyze data from Hypatia's database but is stuck because she's missing a piece of information. Realizing this, Reese authorizes her to run another scan of the town, and Zoan gets to work. Meanwhile, a strange creature locked in a pod deep within an underground structure suddenly breaks free and makes its way to freedom. As Mary and Jack walk the little girl home, she asks Jack if he's okay with ditching his friends just to keep her safe. After assuring her it's all good, Mary asks Jack if he has a family, and after he tells her he's been looking for them for a whole year, he urges her not to feel sorry for him. Although slightly annoyed by his response, Mary ignores him and looks at the little girl, who has just stopped in front of a large hole in the ground. Soon, they pass through the hole and arrive at one of the poorest meeting spots in the Undercity, where Jack encounters a bunch of odd characters in the dull atmosphere. As he mutters something about flowers, the little girl asks what a flower is, and Jack, puzzled, replies that a flower is just a flower. Not long after, the girl runs to the kitchen, where one of the guys there recognizes and thanks the man who brought their little girl, Rin, home, eyeing them curiously. Once everyone is settled, Rin returns with 2 glasses of water for her new friends. Now that she's introduced, Jack hands her all the fancy lunar eggs he bought at the market earlier and encourages her to make an omelet, even though she hasn't tried them before. Rin promises to give it her best shot and rushes back to the kitchen to whip up the omelets. While she's away, Jack asks the man if he's Rin's father, and the man tells him that everyone in the building has lost their families. Then he asks Jack if he's from Earth, and Jack, confused, wonders how he knows that. The man explains that there aren't many people on the moon who can afford to buy eggs at all. So while the Sapientia puppets on Earth claim there's equality among humans, the man tells Jack that all they know on the moon is decay and poverty. He goes on to say there are currently 2 factions on the moon, those who support Earth and those who oppose it, and both sides are in a fierce conflict, often resulting in death and civil wars. Rin's arm is one of the casualties of the brutal fighting that has been tearing through their streets. Just then, Rin, who just finished making the omelet, comes out of the kitchen with a plate and tells the man that she sees the prosthetic arm as a blessing from Bob Skylum, not a curse. Jack smiles at this, invites Rin to join them, and creates a fork using the engraving tech he has, offering it to her so they can eat together. Meanwhile, Zoan is intensely sifting through the data she collected from the scan of the area until she finally hits the jackpot. In a specific file on her screen, she discovers information about L-Zone, Abaddon, and even the Seed projects. Moments later, she spots something moving quickly towards Jack and figures out with Reese that Jack isn't even near them. At that moment, a group of obst soldiers bursts into the meeting place and arrests Rin and everyone else there, including Jack and Mary. As they escort the prisoners to their vans, Inanna, Jorg, and Dwan are seen nearby watching the foolish soldiers do their thing. It doesn't take long for them to realize these independent forces are from the Obst group, who show no mercy to rebels, and apparently to children as well. They spot Jack and Mary and quickly realize how dire the situation is. To help, the trio rushes off to inform the joint army around town. After gathering all the prisoners outside, the captain of the Obst group calls out Rin and tries to get her to tell him the name of the person who helped her escape back in the alley. Seeing that she's staying silent, the captain starts asking for the person who assisted her. Growing tired of waiting for an answer, the heartless bastard kicks her and, pointing a gun at her head, demands once more that she reveal who helped her. At this moment, Jack tries to reveal himself to the bastard, but just as he's about to do so, the creature that escaped from the underground pod earlier attacks a few of the Obst men, draining their life force and killing them instantly. After witnessing the beast's power, the captain abandons Rin and flees. As the beast approaches Rin, Jack intervenes, allowing the jellyfish-like creature to attach itself to his hand. The instant it makes contact, Jack sees strange visions and soon shakes off the jellyfish, watching it scurry away. Shortly after, the captain, unable to let them all go, throws a grenade in their direction. While Jack moves to protect Mary, he sees Rin and Unk alarmingly close to the grenade. Sadly, before he can save them, the grenade explodes, killing them instantly. At this moment, Reese, who heard the explosion, pokes her head out of the stingray and wonders what just happened. Elsewhere, Phil recalls what happened to him that day in the facility, right after he gave Jack his right arm and sent him to Earth. Apparently, little Phil went back to the Forbidden Room and found the real Bob Skylum completely mad. When the real Bob sees him, he asks about Jack, but little Phil ignores the question and asks if he's really human. In response, Bob calls him Seed 2, an artificial species of sapiens created on the ship, and breaks the news that he's not human. Right after that, the real Bob stabs his chest with his hand and rips out his mechanical heart, claiming he won't let Sapientia take over his body. He then tells the confused little Phil that he seems not to be human either. It turns out that the Earth administrators were worried about too many AIs surpassing human intelligence, so they sabotaged and destroyed the facility to wipe out all AI beings there. Just as Bob is about to say something else, he starts losing it, and then Whizbee, Phil's pet robot, swoops in and finishes him off with a bright light. At this point, Phil snaps back to reality, but the next minute, the doctor rushes in to inform them that their operative at the Goddard base, Windy, and the L-Zone have been sabotaged. With no time to waste, Phil and his team take to the air to save Windy. While they're flying, the doctor suits up and urges Phil to give her a map to Hypatia so she can check out what's disturbing there. While Phil's at it, she asks if he's had fun recently, and when he says no, she encourages him to take Windy out on a date when she gets back so he doesn't keep having nightmares. Hearing this, Phil thinks about going on a date with the rude Windy and quickly decides against it. After a bit more joking around, the doctor gets into the vehicle and jumps off the plane. Meanwhile, Mary is back at the Western Delambre base in the Sea of Tranquility, looking in the mirror and worrying about her appearance. When she finally gets in the shower, she takes a moment to remember Jack's bravery and the awful things she said to him before. Realizing her mistake, Mary decides to visit Jack in his room and apologize. Moments later, Jack is in his kitchen cooking nasi goreng, when suddenly, Mary knocks on his door. When he opens it, the wild girl sees herself in his room and comments on the aroma of the food he's preparing. Jack eventually calms down and asks her to wait while he adds some rice to the sauce so the food will be ready quickly. With that, he goes back to cooking and asks Mary about her family. Just as Mary is about to share details about her two older brothers, Reese rings the doorbell. Jack, shocked to see him, opens the door and, before he can say that Mary is in the room with him, Reese rambles on about everything Mary shouldn't hear, like how she might be a spy and whatnot. Eventually, she quiets down when she smells the nasi goreng and rushes to the kitchen to check it out. When she finally spots Mary in the room, Reese notices the revealing clothes she's wearing and freaks out. A few minutes later, the food is ready and served, but the girls aren't eating, which stresses Jack out. After a deafening silence, Reese accuses Mary of invading Jack's room after learning he's an officer, and Mary defends herself by insisting once more that she's not a spy. Soon after, she reminds Reese of everything she's helped them with, like navigating the confusing moon world and all that. At this point, Reese has nothing else to say, and silently asks Jack why he didn't tell her earlier that Mary was in the room when they were discussing their mission. Just as Jack is about to respond, his doorbell rings, and he opens it to find a depressed Jorg complaining with Dwan and Ozma about Mary leaving them for another spaceship. Apparently, Jorg has a crush on her and wants to travel with her again, but doesn't know what to do. As the misguided fool hugs Jack, Dwan points to Mary, who's heard everything he just said, and the boys instantly turn their backs on Jack. Amid all this chaos, Mary asks Reese if she's dating Jack, and Reese, embarrassed, says they're just friends. After answering her question, Reese turns to Mary and asks if she's interested in Jack, and to her surprise, Mary says yes because Jack reminds her of someone she used to know. Reese then asks a few more questions to figure out her intentions, but soon after Mary stays silent, she leaves and dismisses everyone. In the next scene, Reese and the other VC3 members join a virtual meeting with the general and military personnel. After giving a full report on their activities, Reese apologizes to her superiors for the failures they've faced so far in their mission. Thankfully, the superiors understand her perspective, but soon conclude that there must be a mole leaking their information to the enemy. During all this, the general calls on Jack and asks if he spoke with the contact, Phil, during their encounter. When Jack says no, the general inquires if he noticed anything unusual, and again, Jack replies no. However, he mentions that something feels off, especially regarding why Bob Skylum destroyed the orbital shaft at the start. This raises a few eyebrows, and the lanky middle-aged man sitting near the general deems it unnecessary to consider a terrorist's mindset. In light of the recent update, he suggests incorporating the VC3 unit into their eastern forces. To support his argument, he shows a picture of Windy Sylph, a rebel army commander, and describes what happened at the Goddard Eastern base right after her arrival. Since multiple rebel commanders were spotted there, he believes they should unite whatever forces they have left and mobilize to investigate the situation in the east. Realizing his advisor, the lanky old man, is right, General Pitter gives the go-ahead for VC3 to move to the Agaram base in the east, then wraps up the meeting after acknowledging Jacob Shadow's assessment on the Bob Skylum situation. Once the meeting ends, everyone breathes a sigh of relief and returns to their routine. However, soon after, General Pitter gets an unexpected visit from one of the rebel army commanders. About an hour later, Jorg calls Reese somewhere private to discuss Jack, not Mary. Once he has her full attention, he asks if she's noticed Jack acting a bit strange lately. Reese, puzzled, asks what he means by strange. Jorg reminds her of the previous day's incident, but Reese reassures him again that Jack is likely just stressed after all they've been through on the moon. Around this time, Jorg brings up their fight in the church with Phil and asks if Reese knows who Phil is. Though she agrees Phil is odd, Reese reassures Jorg once more that Jack is okay and leaves. To explain what happened right after the Ops captain's explosion, a flashback shows the moments that followed when the joint army arrived to handle the aftermath. At this point, Jack, unaware of the creature behind him, blames himself for Rin and her unc's death. Initially, Mary tries to tell him it's not his fault, but when he talks about taking swift action against Bob Skylum, she changes her tune and insists that Skylum is their only hope. Jack then asks her how she thinks they can end the war. Mary, unsure of what to say, reminds him that the people of Earth started all this and they shouldn't act like victims. The grim state of the moon isn't new, as the Earthlings slaughtered them like they were nothing, claiming to follow orders from Sapientia. If it weren't for Bob Skylum rising up against the Earthlings, there would be no hope on the moon. Realizing she may be right, Jack gasps, and Mary apologizes for speaking out of turn. Jack admits he didn't know all that at first, but now that he does, he'll figure something out. Just then, the jellyfish creature touches Jack where he sits, and the flashback ends. By midnight, Mary is seen staring out the window of their base when she suddenly hears and recognizes the song Jack's humming from somewhere. Curious, she approaches Jack, who's also gazing into space, and asks him about the song. In the meantime, Inanna and her sister are busy sorting through the intentional disinformation to figure out Phil's location. Around this time, Jack talks to Mary about how this is the first time he's met someone who knows the song he's singing. He tells her it's a very old song, but Mary, after telling Jack that her brother has been missing for 8 long years, promises to find him one day. Seeing the determination in her eyes, Jack cheers her on, and they chat for a few more minutes before Mary gets up to go to bed. Before leaving though, Mary genuinely thanks him for saving her from the bomb blast and walks to her quarters feeling hopeful that she will find her brother, Phil, one day, as long as he's on the moon. Meanwhile, Phil, as he approaches the Goddard base, changes his face to look like Bob Skylum's and watches from above as the swarm of jellyfish creatures devours the entire base. As the dangerous creatures move westward, Bob and his commanders make sure to follow and track them to the Sea of Crises. When she finally lands in Hypatia, the Doctor is shocked to see that what they call the L-Zone has vanished. Around that time, Mary also announces to the rest of the VC3 that she is now an official member of their team. Hearing this, Reese refuses to let the twerp join their team because they, being from the joint army, can't allow just any civilian from the moon to tag along any longer. Around this time, Mary latches onto Jack to make Reese jealous and tells her that she only wants to travel with him. At this point, Reese loses her temper and scolds Jack for trying to be slick and whatnot. Just then, Zoan and Inanna show up and get updated on the situation. After hearing Mary's plea, Jack urges Reese to let Mary come with them. So at this point, Reese is stuck. A few hours later, while the VC3 members are on the road to their next location, Mary, who's sitting outside the vehicle as usual, drifts off into a memory of her past where she's floating in some liquid with various weird tentacles trying to touch her. Suddenly, she jolts awake and continues staring at the sea of moon sand before her. Meanwhile, the other VC3 members are still analyzing the flow of information they've gathered. Although a lot of it is disinformation and false flags, one image doesn't make sense to them. An image of Phil in Agarum, which is 100% real. After confirming the location of his hideout, Jack frowns at his longtime buddy and, wondering what the hell happened to Phil, decides he'll make Phil tell him everything that went down. Soon after, Inanna tells them they need to report this to the joint army stationed on the moon because the general and the special unit at Agarum are planning some secret operation involving the moon's people. When Jorg mentions moving alone, Reese points out that Vice Commander Clemenza is in Agarum, the lanky middle-aged man from earlier, and since he's in charge of the operation, they need to hurry and reach him before he brings chaos to Copernicus. Just when they finish discussing, Inanna gets sick and collapses from some sort of moon illness. Moments later, Reese takes over the comms center on the ship and desperately tries to get in touch with their main base, while the others attend to Inanna to provide first aid. Sadly, they quickly realize they have neither the drugs nor the expertise to treat such an illness, even if they get to the joint army base in time. Their only hope now is to find a local specialist or doctor who has spent a long time on the moon. Knowing that it'll take longer to reach Agarum and that Inanna might not make it, Mary suggests they take Inanna to the one person she knows can treat her, but to manage expectations, she adds they first have to get to Posidonius, which is in the opposite direction from Agarum. At this point, the team is at a standstill since Inanna advises them to continue toward Agarum so they don't get distracted, as the east is the only area they still control, and as soldiers, they can't let their emotions get in the way. After she collapses again, everyone turns to Reese, the team leader, to hear her decision. After a brief silence, Jack finally responds, telling everyone they should always prioritize a comrade's life over the mission, and suggests they turn around and head to Posidonius. Satisfied with his response, the whole team, including Reese, feels hopeful and turns the vehicle around toward Posidonius. As the VC-3's Stingray travels to its new destination, Reese talks to Jorg about how terrible she feels as a person, saying that if Jack hadn't stepped in earlier, she might have put the mission ahead of Inanna. Having heard her, Jorg reassures her, saying it's fine because she acted like a soldier. Now Now that he's finally noticed the shift in Jack's mentality, Jorg admits he was worried for nothing since Jack hasn't changed at all. After 2 more days of travel, the VC3 team finally arrives at Posidonius to meet the doctors. As they're about to head out to where the doctors are hiding, Mary picks Jack, Duan, and Zoan to be on her team, and Reese, although annoyed by her choice, has no option but to let her go with them. On their way there, Mary, who had Jack carry all the heavy stuff, tells him to walk faster or he'll get left behind, and a very annoyed Jack reminds her of their earlier experience at the subway market 2 hours ago. Apparently, Mary had the VC3 team buy a lot of supplies that she knew the doctors would need in their settlement, and made poor Jack haul everything through the mountains to the hideout. Back in the Stingray, Reese listens to Jorg and Ozma discussing how hot Mary is, with Jorg even chastising Jack for not being into Mary yet. While Ozma is confused, Jorg, aware that Reese is eavesdropping, tells Ozma that Mary likes Jack, although they don't really understand what kind of feeling she has for him just yet. Fed up with the uncertainty, Reese stands up angrily and, pretending to be worried about Inanna, leaves the Stingray running to join Mary and the others at the doctor's hideout. When she finally catches up with them, Mary frowns and asks if Reese still has trouble trusting her. When Reese says no, claiming she's just following the rules and staying with the other 3, Mary quickly runs behind them and teases Jack, who is still sore from all the heavy lifting. Seeing how confident and expressive she is with her feelings for Jack makes Reese jealous, bringing back a memory she's never forgotten from 11 years ago. On that day, young Reese, who was the mayor's daughter, and young Jack ran into 3 thugs who threatened everyone, even kids, for following Sapientia. To protect Reese, Jack puts himself at risk, taking a beating just to give the pretty Reese enough time to escape. After taking down Jack, the 3 thugs turn their attention to Reese, threatening to hurt young Eric, who is already knocked out, if she doesn't give in. Just when she's about to surrender, Jack gets up again and attacks the trio with a bottle. Unfortunately for him, they dodge and beat him up again, but Jack manages to grab one of them and bites him in the nuts. After surviving the nut bite, the thugs get furious at Jack and aim their guns at him. Before they can pull the trigger, however, Harry, Jack's butler, shows up and beats the thugs to a pulp, saving the kids. Later that evening, Reese scolds Jack for risking his life for her, and young Jack, confused about why she's angry, asks her what could be more important than a friend's life. Around this time, the flashback ends, and Reese smiles, happy to realize that her feelings for Jack haven't changed. After walking a few more meters, Zoan spots some movement, and they soon encounter a group of people. Mary quickly takes charge, calling one of them Kevin, easing the tension, and chatting with them. Eventually, the whole group of doctors welcomes them to their base, and while some share their gifts, the real doctors take care of Inanna. Soon, Inanna recovers from her illness, and Reese checks in on her, thankful that Inanna is back to normal. Shortly after, Mary checks in on Kevin during his smoke break and stops for a chat. After Kevin tells her he knows those people are from Earth, he accepts their visit since they brought food and supplies. Moving on, Kevin asks Mary if she's still searching for her long-lost brother, and she replies yes. Then he tells her that, according to his findings, Inanna's infection didn't occur naturally. Based on what he discovered, she was intentionally infected by someone 3 days ago, and since he doesn't know who would do such a thing, he warns Mary to be cautious with her actions involving the VC3. Around that time, Zoan, her sister, and the others come up to them, thank Kevin, who is pretty annoyed at Inanna for leaving while she's still recovering, and tell him they have to leave now to avoid more trouble. Realizing there's nothing he can do, Kevin wishes them well and urges them never to come back. With that, the VC3 departs from the remote hideout for good, and Kevin wishes Mary the best. Meanwhile, in Agarum City, Phil is seen in one of the labs freezing every L-Zone jellyfish pod he can find and complaining about how Sapientia outsmarted them. With the tension rising, the VC3 heads toward the city again, and Jack apologizes to Reese for doing something that could hurt her reputation. Reese reassures him that she's fine since it's not the first time, and tells him she's learned she needs to be more open with her feelings sooner so she doesn't miss out on life's joys. Hearing this, Jack smiles and lets her do her thing. By then, Jorg, standing outside the vehicle, thinks about the time they just bought to counter the mole, and then he receives a message from Inanna praising him for a job well done. In response, Jorg asks if she's okay, and Inanna assures him she's fine, as it's all part of the mission. As Bob Skylum army approaches the Sea of Crises, the crazy guy inside laughs at the sight of jellyfish creatures wreaking havoc on the moonland. As for Phil, he takes a break inside the lab after freezing off the entire stash of L-Zone jellyfish creature pods. While he's taking a breather, the doctor, later known as Salamandra, barges in and tells Phil that the L-Zone jellyfish in Hypatia's underground lab have vanished. Confused, Phil asks for an explanation, and Salamandra tells him the jellyfish was reprogrammed, just like the others, by the branch embedded in Sapientia. She also mentions that she noticed signs of the jellyfish left in the records from Hypatia's hideout, and Phil asks her about the state of the city. When Salamandra assures him that the city is doing fine, Phil gets up to continue gathering information. Before they can do that, a slight tremor hits, and the pair rushes outside the facility, only to discover that an explosion occurred somewhere in town just a few minutes ago. They soon realize that their Eastern party just bombed one of Ob's housing complexes, and Phil urges Salamandra to shut their hideout down and lie low to avoid getting caught up in the chaos. At that moment, neither Phil nor Salamandra knows that they're being watched by spies from the Joint Army, allowing them to move around freely. Back at the Joint Army base a few miles away, Clemenza tells General Pitter in a meeting that they've finally pinpointed Bob Skylum's location and asks for permission to send his hound squad to take him down at all costs. Realizing how wasteful that might be, Pitter suggests sending a smaller squad, known as VC3, to subdue and bring in Bob Skylum. Clemenza protests this, feeling that the squad's leader, Reese, is not only incompetent but also 36 hours behind schedule. He tells Pitter that he can only give Reese a 24-hour grace period to show up and take the job. If she doesn't arrive with her squad by then, he'll send his hound unit into Agaram City to take down Bob Skylum, even if it means hurting some civilians. With no arguments left, Pitter concedes to Clemenza's demands and ends the meeting. Soon after, Pitter meets with one of Bob Skylum's commanders. This time, they discuss Seed 1 and the possibility that Sapientia is behind its disappearance, while Pitter ruminates over his next steps. 24 hours after Pitter's meetings, the VC3 team finally reaches Agaram's outskirts. As they speed along the highway, just about to arrive at their destination, Inanna apologizes again for wasting their time and tells the others that she has been trying to contact their people in Agaram for a while, but with no success. Although the radio silence could just be them being cautious, Reese suspects that Clemenza might be giving them a hard time for being late. In any case, Mary speaks out of turn and asks what the team plans to do with their lives once they finally kill the big, bad Bob Skylum. Realizing she's crossed a line with no responses coming, she quickly apologizes for being a jerk. Jack, meanwhile, ignores her and thinks about his buddy, Phil, one more time. When they finally see the beautiful city on the horizon, Jack gets up and stares at it. About an hour later, they reach the entrance gate, but they're denied entry by Clemenza's guards, who claim that the Hounds are on the loose to hunt down Phil and the other rebels. Turns out, Hound is a hardline anti-terror unit formed in the east, and their deployment means they have the green light to kill. Understanding the situation, Reese and the others decide to refrain from causing more trouble. Minutes later, Jack, unable to take any more senseless killings and damage, curses the consequences and prepares to push past the guards. Just before he leaves, Reese steps in front of him and urges him to let the Hounds do their job. But Jack, after saying he can't allow them to kill the contact, since he still needs answers, apologizes, pushes Reese aside, runs, and jumps past the guards, who immediately call for backup. Moments before the chaos starts, Salamandra is spotted in the Agaram hideout chatting with Phil and the other eccentric commander about the L-Zone creatures they froze earlier. With some time on their hands, Phil asks about Seed 1, and after hearing the crazy commander laugh about how his whereabouts are unknown, Salamandra vows to revise the plan. The guys then encourage her to stay safe and end the call. Just seconds after the call wraps up, Salamandra takes a sip of her coffee and calls Jack rude for showing up at her place uninvited. Although surprised to find Salamandra in the hideout where Phil's supposed to be, Jack stays calm and urges her to surrender peacefully so no townspeople get hurt. Hearing this, Salamandra appreciates his kindness, but insists that he let her go. At this point, Jack gets frustrated, and Salamandra turns to get a good look at his face. Realizing he's Philosio's friend, Jacob, she changes the subject and talks about their leader, Phil, for a bit. When Jack hears her talk about Phil like that, he gets flooded with unwanted memories, as he slowly comes to grips with the fact that Phil is actually Bob Skylum, the leader of the rebel group. After confirming that Jack didn't report Phil to the Joint Army, Salamandra wonders what to do with him, and even gets dangerously close to his engraved gun. At this point, Jack, who knows the Hound soldiers are surrounding the apartment, pleads with Salamandra to consider surrendering so she can leave alive. Just after she tells him to defeat her first, the soldiers hanging outside the window toss 2 grenades into the apartment, and they both jump in to handle them to avoid explosions. After that, the Hounds start banging on the door to break in. Unable to let them inside, Salamandra reinforces the steel door and fights back against the Hounds, rappelling down to the apartment. When she gets hit once during the fight, Jack jumps in to take out the soldier, and after watching her kick 2 soldiers, tells her he doesn't want anyone to die. Around this time, Salamandra slams him to the ground and, after saying that the war is fought to end all the killings, expresses how happy she would be if he follows her to meet Phil. As they plan their next move, another soldier appears, and Salamandra throws Jack at him before smashing down the apartment door with her bare feet and taking out all the soldiers outside. She quickly takes down a few Hounds, races down the stairs, and makes a break for it. The Hounds, having recognized her, instantly switch their target to her and the male soldier protecting her. As the fight escalates, Salamandra kicks down more soldiers to clear her escape route. Meanwhile, Mary finds Duan cooking some soup back at their spot in Agaram City and asks him what he's making. Without saying a word, Duan hands her a bowl, and Mary falls in love with it as soon as she takes a bite. While they sit and eat, Duan encourages her to try to understand Reese and the others, pointing out that most don't know how to deal with people from the moon. Agreeing, Mary asks why he hangs out with them, and right after Duan says he's usually alone and isn't swayed by love or hate, hate, he gives Mary a creepy smile that leaves her speechless. Shortly after finishing their meal, Mary gets up, ready to go after Jack, but Zoan shows up and warns her against it, knowing things could get messy. Disappointed, Mary grabs some candy and carries on. Before she can get far, two joint army soldiers stop her and politely ask her out. A few moments later, the unit captain appears, shoos the soldiers away, and recognizing Mary as a moon civilian, asks for her ID. Before anything happens, Zoan rushes in to tell the army guys that Mary is a guide hired by Major Reese herself. As expected, the army captain is a jerk, and since he wasn't informed about this, orders his men to detain her. Just then, Duan shows up and blocks their path, but the captain, unfazed, tells his men to check Duan's ID and detain both him and Mary. At this point, things turn violent as the soldiers rough up Mary until she unleashes an energy blast, so powerful it knocks out the captain and his weakling men instantly. Fortunately, the VC3 members are fine, but many of them are clueless about what just went down. Meanwhile, Clemenza discovers Jack's involvement in the Hound's mission and quickly orders his team to warn Jack to leave before he gets caught in the crossfire. While they handle that, another unit alerts Clemenza that the unidentified object from Goddard is heading toward Agarum City, and if they're not careful, things could spiral out of control very fast. Around that time, Jack catches up to Salamandra and uses his martial arts to stop her. Recognizing his skill, Salamandra challenges him to a fight and tries her hardest to take Jack down fast so she can escape ASAP. She extends her hand, shapes it like a blade, and uses it to block as many shots as possible to protect herself. Just when she finally has Phil in a submissive position, a joint army drone appears and shoots at her, breaking them apart. Realizing she's about to be caught, Salamandra dodges the drone and keeps running for her life. When Jack comes to, he transforms his gun into a sniper rifle and takes out the drone from a distance. Then, he continues chasing after Salamandra and only stops when they both notice an explosion in the distance. For the next few seconds, the duo stares at the explosion, but then Salamandra realizes that the explosion occurred in the underground lab where the frozen L-zones are kept, so she heads in that direction, with Jack following her. Meanwhile, a horde of L-zone jellyfish monsters continues racing toward Agarum City at breakneck speed, devouring everything in their way. Hovering above the horde is a fleet of rebel ships, keeping an eye on the monster's path. When Phil, also known as Bob Skylum, finally makes it back to the master ship, he's welcomed and informed about the horde's movements. Right now, the mutant is heading for Agarum, and Bob is trying to figure out what's attracting the monster to the city. A few minutes after the explosion, another horde of L-zone monsters seeps out from the underground lab and moves through Agarum, searching for something. Nearby, Salamandra tracks the monster's path to an abandoned area in the city, hoping to figure out what the crazy creature is after, completely ignoring Jack, who is still in pursuit. At one point, the monster changes direction, and Salamandra, worried the monster might attack the few people living in that area, grabs onto a rebar and shoots at the monster when she gets above it, but it's useless. Around this time, Jack catches up and spots the monster, recognizing it from before. As he rushes over to join Salamandra, the doctor faces the monster directly and gets slammed aside by the impatient beast. Struggling to keep pace, Jack throws an incendiary grenade at the monster, only to see nothing happen. Unable to find a way to take the monster down, he keeps running alongside it, hoping that by some miracle, something will stop it. After running a bit further, the duo halts when they see a humanoid figure in the monster's path, and Jack quickly recognizes Mary. As he tries to move her out of the way, something strange happens, and the creature comes to a stop right in front of Mary. While seemingly under some kind of hypnosis, Mary touches the creature, creating a huge electrical spark that causes it to extend its tentacles and attack Jack and Salamandra. Dodging the attacks, Jack shouts at Mary, urging her to get out of the way, but when she doesn't move, he shoots a grappling hook to pull her out of danger. As they land, Jack tries to snap Mary out of her trance, but when he touches her cheek, something changes, and he falls into a trance himself, where he sees Mary suspended and trapped inside a transparent energy ball. Without hesitation, he moves closer, touches the ball, and breaks it, freeing her. When she finally comes to, Mary frowns at poor Jack and gives him a hard slap, thinking he was harassing her. As Salamandra tries to wrap her head around what just happened, the L-Zone monster suddenly transforms into a massive hardened cyst, and soon after, the joint army arrives, surrounds them, and takes them all into custody at the Agarum base. On their way to the base, Jack thinks about what he doesn't understand yet and recalls what he saw in his trance earlier. Before he can think further, a very annoyed Ozma reminds him of his current situation. After being suspected of aiding a terrorist attack the previous year, Ozma points out that right after Sapientia lifted his punishment, he was placed under Reese's supervision, and that his antics will only get Reese in trouble. Fully aware that Ozma is right, Jack stays quiet and braces himself for whatever punishment he may face in the future. In time, they arrive at the joint base in Aragum, and Reese gives Jack a slap on the cheek for ignoring her orders. After that, Jack inquires about Mary, Mary, who is currently asleep in a room, and then asks if Salamandra is around and okay. Reese informs him that Salamandra is locked up deep underground. Right after that, Reese reminds Jack of what he said when he disobeyed her and accuses him of acting out of line, all in the name of protecting someone. Knowing Jack, Reese senses he's hiding something, so she tells him to spill the beans now that they're together. At this point, Jack remembers his first reunion with adult Phil and instead requests to meet Salamandra one more time to talk to her. Hearing this, Reese asks if he understands his situation, and Jack mutters some more foolish words that only annoy her further. After giving him a few more sharp slaps, Reese walks out on him. Shortly after, she joins Clemenza and his crew in the underground lab where Mary is being analyzed. She's scolded for arriving late, but is then thanked by the lanky man for bringing something more valuable with her. Meanwhile, Jack finds himself in the same room with Zoan and Duan, who help treat his slap wounds. During their conversation, Zoan tells Jack that he owes his life to Reese, because if it weren't for her, he would have been deported the moment he disobeyed orders. So, Reese must have a lot of power for him to get off so easily. With that said, Zoan manages to hack into Mary's lab room to watch a live feed of her analysis, which he quickly shows to the other two. Back in the lab, the researchers discover a powerful energy surge in Mary's body, matching the energy they've measured in the L-Zone monsters. Although they don't know why, the lead researcher informs Clemenza that the mutant strain has completely merged with Mary by now, implying she must be the core, or better yet, the queen bee of the L-Zone hive, making her a very dangerous individual. Hearing this, Jack recalls the incident where Unk and Rin died, and realizes that's when the energy surge must have entered her. Just then, Clemenza receives a call about General Pitter heading toward the Agarum base, and while shocked by his arrival, he prepares to meet him. As the general heads toward the Agarum base, the swarm of L-Zone monsters continues moving toward the city at a disturbing pace. At one point, Bob Skylum's fleet drops dozens of bombs on the horde, hoping to wipe them out. Unfortunately, that's not enough to stop the monsters. They just break apart and regroup as one massive blob of gooey creature. By now, Bob Skylum, the rebel leader, realizes why the monster is called a sea just, like Themas. They pull back from the fight to figure out their next moves. Soon after, Windy and Harbinger arrive at the flying ship in a small aircraft. After welcoming her aboard, Bob urges her to report on her mission at Goddard. So far, Windy mentions that the base encountered the L-Zone, which disappeared from Hypatia, calling it a new seed encounter. When they discuss a certain individual being the core of the L-Zone monster, Bob asks for the person's identity, and Windy pulls up a photo of Mary, also known as the core of the L-Zone monsters. Right after their meeting, Phil finds a private spot on the ship and crashes out, having previously tried to keep poor Mary out of everything. Back at the Aragum base, the researchers grow concerned about the L-Zone monster drawing closer to the city. They worry they should evacuate instead of just sitting there, waiting to be attacked like sitting ducks. Meanwhile, Clemenza, Reese, and some guards stand at the entrance of the base to quickly welcome Pitter. After checking everyone, Pitter requests to see the rebel commander they captured before the other HQs take action about it, and Clemenza leads him to the underground prison. Around the same time, Ozma performs a scan of the area around the base, and soon discovers just how close the monsters are. While he continues scanning, a random worker at the base finds a strange device on Pitter's ship, and asks his colleagues what he should do about it. Reese, on the other hand, is seen walking towards Sapientia AI in a dark room, staring at it. Meanwhile, Inanna tells Jorg that she's worried about Mary and the approaching monster horde. When she asks if Sapientia had anticipated this, Jorg admits he doesn't know, as it seems their mission to delay the monster's arrival and uncover the mole within their ranks didn't go well. After grumbling a bit about recent events, Jorg questions Sapientia's intentions and even chuckles as he admits he never thought he'd end up doing something like that on the moon. Regardless, he confesses he understands how Eric felt before he died, and Inanna, concerned about what he just said, urges him not to think that way. At that moment, Jack sees Reese entering Mary's room while General Pitter and Clemenza's men move towards Salamandra's cell deep underground. Inside Mary's room, Reese pauses in front of her, questioning her reality and asking Mary's unconscious body why she feels like a terrible person for doubting and not believing her all along. Jack, listening in on the conversation, feels for Reese, his longtime buddy. Around that time, General Pitter gets very close to Salamandra's cell and gestures for her to come toward him. When she finally responds, Pitter recognizes her as the renowned rebel army commander Amir El Salamandra and compliments her beauty, making Salamandra wonder if he really means that. With no answer given, General Pitter quietly reveals himself as the Mole, secretly hacking into the electricity distribution system around the base and causing a blackout throughout the entire facility using the EMP device that the random worker previously overlooked. Suddenly, Zoan gets disconnected from the system and the whole army base plunges into chaos. With gravity control offline, Jorg and Inanna split up to check on the others. Pitter tells Salamandra to stop looking for Seed One because they need to capture the girl, Mary, urgently. Upon hearing this, Salamandra activates her super strength, breaks out of prison right in front of Clemenza and his guys, and takes down all the soldiers shooting at her, including the skinny old man. Meanwhile, Ozma is returning to the base and notices the blackout and radio silence, wondering what happened. Soon after, he sees a huge battleship with cloaking tech flying towards the base and prepares for battle. However, when the ship flies over him, Ozma jumps as high as he can and throws a grenade at the ship's hull, damaging the engine and causing it to crash. Shortly after the ship crashes, Ozma turns around to see more battleships coming in for an invasion. With no time to waste, the ships start firing thousands of rounds at the base, destroying everything in sight, and the whole base gets alerted to get ready for a big fight. To handle the situation, Reese orders the guards in Mary's room to go fight outside and leaves Mary in her care. Once they leave, Mary activates her engraving and creates a gun, pointing it at Reese's head. Around this time, Inanna shows up with Jack's gear and hands it to him. As soon as he puts it all on, Zoan retrieves footage from Mary's location but finds Reese standing too close to her with a gun in her hand. As for Jorg, he heads to the prison cell and finds Clemenza half dead. When he asks for an update, Clemenza tells him the rebels are after Mary. Outside, the battle intensifies as both sides exchange gunfire, leaving no one alive. Eventually, one of the battleships crashes into the Agarum control centers, and Phil, who survived the fall, rushes further into the facility to save his sister. Meanwhile, Mary is in a trance, walking in a certain direction when suddenly, an L-Zone monster appears, calls her name, and tries to envelop her in darkness. With a strong will, Mary snaps out of her dream and finds Reese pointing a gun at her face. With no time to waste, Reese apologizes for what she's about to do and pulls the trigger. Thankfully, just as she pulls the trigger, Jack, who arrives just in time, shoots her hand and causes her to misfire. Realizing what just happened, Mary gets up and peeks around to see Jack holding his gun and aiming it at Reese. With the chaos escalating outside, Jack urges Mary, still confused about what's going on, to come to his side first. At that moment, Reese speaks up for the first time since the misfire, telling Mary to get away from Jack. After getting Mary behind him, Jack nervously stares at Reese and recalls the moments when he heard the researchers discuss Mary's power source. Right after explaining Mary's power, the lead researcher shows them some images of the crystallized L-Zone monster and explains that Jack's presence seems to have affected the energy that fused with Mary, leading to the bleaching or crystallization of the organism. Considering all that's occurred, the researcher concludes that Jack, Mary, and the L-Zone creature might be connected. Hearing this, Duan and Zoan look at Jack with confusion as he tries to clear his name. Meanwhile, Clemenza steps out of the lab to greet the general after ordering the researchers to upload all their findings to the AI, Sapientia, and wait for its decision. Recalling the critical moments that brought him to this point, Jack asks Reese if Sapientia ordered her to kill Mary. With tears on her face, Reese asks Jack why he's always the same, never changing. As she raises her gun toward them, Jack apologizes for dragging her into his mess, telling her that Eric was right all along. He suggests that Sapientia deliberately put them all on the same team, so they couldn't run away from each other. At this point, an emotional Reese orders him to shut up, claiming that the only thing she's done her whole life is follow Sapientia's orders like a faithful dog. Understanding her struggle, Jack shares a few more thoughts about the painful decision she's about to make, adding that maybe, in an alternate dimension, there was a way for Eric not to die. As he mentions his usual catchphrase, "Nothing's more important than a comrade's life," Reese breaks down, and he bluntly tells her he's going to help Mary with or without her. With Reese now sobbing on the floor, Jack promises to take care of everything and return to everyone as a whole man. He picks Mary up and leaves Reese quietly crying on the floor. Meanwhile, Salamandra is seen fighting and questioning every soldier she meets about Mary's whereabouts. So far, nobody seems to know where she is, so she kills them and moves on to the next. Soon after, numerous soldiers arrive to confront her, but she takes out a lot of them until they're all down. Just then, Zoan, who's been hiding around the corner and watching the fight, throws a grenade near Salamandra. Once it explodes, she approaches the large woman and shoots her. Surprisingly, Salamandra blocks the bullets with her bare hands and kicks her hard. Seconds later, Inanna and Duan rush at her, but Salamandra quickly knocks Inanna out. Duan, the big guy, stands firm against the powerful Salamandra and proves to be tough to fight. Sadly, he soon falls when Salamandra axe kicks him and runs away. After watching her leave, Duan goes back to the girls to check on them and realizes, surprisingly, that they're okay. Elsewhere, Jack and Mary finally find an exit from the base, but before they leave, they pause to observe the battlefield and soon see a sea of L-Zone monsters approaching the Agarum base. With no time to waste, Jack holds Mary's hand and waits for something to happen to the sea of monsters. Sadly, the horde keeps getting stronger as they close in on Mary, climbing over the thick electronic shield protecting the real Agarum city. Realizing that holding hands might not work, Mary apologizes and asks Jack if those monsters are truly attacking the city because of her. Once she indirectly discovers that she's the cause of the monster attack, Mary rambles a bit more and then asks Jack to get her out of there. Jack happily agrees, but as they're about to leave the base, George shows up and stops them from moving further. By that time, the L-Zone monster finally broke into the Agarum Joint Army base and devoured everything in its path. When Jack tells George about what will happen if Mary doesn't get out of the base, George Jorg says he already heard it all from Reese. Moving on, Jorg claims to understand how Jack feels and offers to get Mary out of there himself to keep Jack from getting into trouble with the joint army again. When Jack refuses to hand Mary over, Jorg brings up Sapientia's guidance, and at this point, Jack ignores the consequences and jumps into space with Mary. Unable to let them escape, Jorg follows and kicks Jack aside, stopping his flight. Just as he's about to grab Mary, Jack zooms back and fights Jorg, who's much stronger. After desperately trying and failing to hit Jorg, he gets axe kicked and ends up with a bloody nose. As Jack writhes in pain, Jorg gets behind him and tries to force him into a submissive position. Thankfully, before Jorg can make Jack surrender, Phil shows up and stops him from hurting Jack. At one point during their fight, Phil grabs Jorg's gun and lets him fire all the bullets into his hand. When Jorg finally drops the gun, Phil breaks it and asks Mary if she trusts the man escorting her. When Mary assures him she trusts Jack completely, Phil smiles, points his right arm at Jorg, and then releases Whizbee from his arm, shocking both Jorg and Jack at the absurdity of the situation. Eventually, Mary recognizes the bot as Whizbee and starts playing with it, while the other guys just stare. After chatting a bit more with Mary, Phil orders Whizbee to escort her and Jack out of the facility. Whizbee obeys and figures out where the Stingray is parked. As Jack and Mary head to the garage, Jorg tries to stop them one more time, but this time, Phil blocks him. Jorg asks Phil a few questions about who he is, but when Phil doesn't answer, he keeps fighting him. Just then, the L-Zone monsters cause an explosion at the window, and Phil gets ready to leave the base. When they finally reach the garage, Mary ignores the Stingray and hops on a bike with Jack, riding it out to freedom. Shortly after they leave, Phil gets seriously beaten by Jorg, but soon enough, Salamandra informs him that it's time to go. Getting up, Phil faces the broken window and jumps off the ledge. When Jorg reaches the ledge, he's disappointed to see Phil on his battleship, leaving the base. As Jack exits the Agarum base with Mary, he looks back at the city and apologizes to everyone for leaving so suddenly. Around this time, the other VC3 members find Jorg standing on the balcony and rush to get him before the monster reaches him. With everything that's happened, Reese becomes a new person as she accepts that Jack is and always will be the same person. About a year after the Agarum attack, a cloaked figure, revealed to be Reese, visits what looks like an abandoned facility and finally stops when she reaches what she calls her mother. A few days after Reese's visit to the abandoned facility, General Pitter and Salamandra are at the Moonchain's chemical plant site up north, near the Plato crater, doing a routine checkup on the growth and health of the L-Zone monster stored there. When Pitter asks Salamandra about the situation, she assures him everything's fine. Over the past year, Whizbee's data processing as Seed 4 has made it possible to control Mary, so they have no choice but to rely on her. Hearing this, Pitter asks for some information about Jack, and Salamandra tells him Jack seems to be taking good care of Mary. Plus, Phil trusts him, so even if Jack might dislike them, Phil believes he'll remain loyal until the end. Curious, Pitter wonders why Phil trusts his childhood friend so much, but Salamandra explains that Phil sees Jack as a man who follows through on his decisions. Having met and talked to Jack a few times, Pitter realizes Phil is right. Just as they wrap up that conversation, the L-Zone monster suddenly reacts violently, startling both Pitter and Salamandra. Moments later, the L-Zone calms down, and they both realize that Mary, the core of the monster, has been playing them all along. With that, the scene ends, and the next scene opens up in a flashback to an event that took place at the Shadow Residence 13 years ago. On that fateful night, everyone gathered to celebrate the creation of engraving technology by Eric Baker's father, Benedetto Baker, or Ben Baker for short. As the party goes on, Ben is seen looking as gloomy as ever, while many of his friends try to cheer him up, with some even attempting to get him drunk. Meanwhile, young Jorg is spotted in a corner trying to impress some girls, and Reese, the future major and leader of the VC3, wanders through the party area looking for something new. At that moment, Mona Shadow, Jack's mother at the time, calls for everyone's attention and gives a light opening speech before introducing the renowned creator of the engraving technology to the crowd, ushering him to the podium to talk about his tech. As Eric's father takes the podium, Reese scans the crowd for her son, Eric, and soon finds him uninterested, playing games as usual. Annoyed, Reese approaches him and scolds him for not being present to listen to his father, but Eric ignores her and keeps playing. After attempting to talk about Sapientia, the world-famous AI, without success, Reese gives up and focuses on the speech instead. Not long after, Eric's father messes up and gets scolded by Mona from the podium. While Reese finds this odd, her attention quickly shifts when she hears someone playing the piano in a dark room beyond some closed doors. At first, she ignores the sound, but as it becomes more persistent, she decides to check it out. After opening several doors, including the giant entrance, Reese finally spots Jack by the piano, playing the tune he and his old buddy, Phil, used to play when they were younger. Curious, Reese moves closer and asks him about the song, but Jack admits he doesn't know the title or the singer. Despite that, Reese sits next to the lonely boy, recognizing him as the one the Shadow family adopted, and plays that exact Toon on the piano so beautifully that Jack remembers the times he used to jam with Phil. When she finishes playing the song, she asks for Jack's thoughts, and Jack, really impressed by her talent, introduces himself. When he learns Reese's name, he eagerly asks her to play the tune again. Touched by his appreciation for her skill, Reese happily plays the song over and over until they both get tired and fall asleep. Just then, the flashback ends, and Reese wakes up to Ozma urging her to get back in the game. After apologizing for dozing off, Reese heads to the cockpit and tells both Inanna and their new team member, Niger, to play the message from their spy, Lewis. When they finally play the audio, the whole team hears the crazy guy talking about finding the ship their target. Mary is on and marking it for easy spotting. Right after getting the info they need, Reese turns off the recording and listens to her teammate discuss the person who approved Lewis's hiring. Eventually, the team wishes Duan and Zoan could still help them out, but they quickly change the subject, remembering they're still on the list, and refocus. As soon as they spot the joint army's fleet, Reese starts the operation and orders everyone to take their positions while they can. Noticing the first HQ's fleet is below them, Reese tells the pilots to fly a little lower and blend in. Once they pass that, Jorg watches the movement of the L-Zone monster on the ground, thinking about Jack and Mary. When Dahlia, another member, asks why he looks distracted, Bro lies and says he's just thinking about how the monster's movements remind him of the omelets his mom used to make. Around that time, Ozma exposes the joke, and Jorg does his best to keep it going. Soon after, they enter the combat zone and get serious, dodging as many attacks as they can while speeding toward their marked ship. When they get much closer to the L-Zone, Niger is a little shocked and impressed, seeing how the Moonchain's fleet is controlling the L-Zone monsters like it's nothing. Eventually, he brushes off the sight and focuses on bringing them closer to the marked ship. After dodging and speeding up a few more times, they finally reach their marked ship, which turns out to be the enemy's flagship. Reese takes a moment to prepare herself for what's next, but unfortunately, the ship's bots quickly attach themselves to the Stingray to protect the enemy flagship. To prevent any damage to the Stingray, Niger increases the ship's speed and flies as fast as possible to shake off the bots. Once they finally get rid of the bots, they fly up toward the flagship's hangar, do a loop around it once, and just manage to get into the enemy ship right before the hangar closes. As soon as they land on the enemy ship's deck, dozens of Moonchain soldiers rush them, and the VC3 members engage them all in a crossfire. Amid all the chaos, Reese, Jorg, and Ozma slip past the enemy lines and eventually make it to the upper deck. Moments before they arrive, Salamandra asks Pitter for an update on the situation, and he fills her in. Realizing there's no time to waste, Salamandra prepares to fight whoever comes her way, fearing the worst. Around this time, Jorg, running through the corridor with Reese, remembers one of the strategy meetings they had before this mission. Niger had asked about Jack and General Pitter's whereabouts over the past year, but since there was nothing to say, they shifted the conversation to the situation in the north. With the northern forces retreating, Inanna informs everyone that the first HQ plans to attack the Moonchain fleet, believing Mary, the core, will be on one of the ships. Before moving on, Ozma questions why the rebel army is relocating the L-Zone to Copernicus City, a place they fought so hard to protect, when the L-Zone only brings destruction. With no answers, Inanna emphasizes that the first HQ definitely can't afford to lose Copernicus City to the L-Zone. Therefore, their mission as the VC3 will be to seize the target amidst the chaos and bring back their spy, Lewis. With this established, the flashback ends, and Jorg detonates a few items in the corridor with an ECM to disrupt communications and the ship's power system. Seconds after the explosion, the upper deck loses sight of the ship and soon can't track the invaders. With tensions rising, Pitter orders backup power, but it's too late as Reese and the other two force their way onto the upper deck to fight and recapture Mary, the L-Zone's core. As they infiltrate, all three VC3 fighters team up to take down as many guards as they can to clear a path to find Mary. During the fight, Reese faces ex-General Pitter, but soon, Ozma and Jorg confront Salamandra, who takes them on with ease. With everything set, Reese asks the general to reveal who's giving him orders, and Pitter, impressed by her newfound questioning ability, compliments her maturity and chats with her. Unable to handle his talk any longer, Reese demands Mary's location and attacks him. Meanwhile, Jorg and Ozma shoot at Salamandra with everything they have, but nothing phases the Woman of Steel. Eventually, Ozma charges at her blindly, missing completely and getting knocked out. Nearby, Reese overpowers Pitter effortlessly and pins him against the wall. Realizing he can't win, Pitter tries to escape, but Reese catches him and shoots him in the head, killing him. By this point, Reese tells Jorg and Ozma to join her in taking down the bastard, and soon, the three of them create an opening even Salamandra can't block. Just as Reese takes her shot, Mary shows up just in time and blocks the bullets. Shortly after, Jack arrives and happily greets everyone on the ship, saying it's been a long time since they last saw each other. As soon as Reese and the others spot their rebel buddy, Jack, their lives come crashing down as they try to figure out how and why Jack chose to join the rebel army for a whole year. Keep in mind, the first HQ's fleet is overpowering the Moonchain fleet, so they've bombarded the enemy flagship, the ship everyone's on, to inflict maximum damage. With no time to waste, Jorg shakes off his emotions, yells Jack's name, and charges at him with all his might. As he throws some of his hardest punches, poor Jorg asks Jack why he joined and survived in the rebel army for an entire year. On the flip side, Jack tells Jorg to stop fighting because he's got his own things to deal with. At that moment, Salamandra, who was saved by Mary earlier, shows up and unloads on Jorg like a well-oiled machine. When Jack tells her not to go too hard on Jorg, Salamandra reassures him that she actually went easy on him. She then apologizes for making Jack meet his friends again, against his wishes, and advises them to get off the ship before it's too late. Checking on Mary, Jack looks over at Ozma and Reese, only to find a shocked Reese just standing there in disbelief. Eventually, he pulls himself together and takes Salamandra's advice. Salamandra then makes a hole in the ship, letting the intense air pressure from outside rush in, jumps out with the other two, and secures herself and them to another ship. Shortly after they escape, Jorg hurriedly seals the hole Salamandra made earlier. Once that's done, he calls for Reese for further orders, but unfortunately, Reese is too stunned by Jack's reappearance to do anything. After boarding the next ship, Salamandra takes charge and finally figures out an escape route. Meanwhile, Reese, Ozma, and Georg rush back to the Stingray and get the hell out of there before they blow up with the enemy flagship. As Salamandra's new ship speeds off into the horizon, Jack takes one last look at the Stingray before it vanishes from view, hoping never to see it again. A few hours later, a bunch of high-ranking officials from Earth in strange white robes gather for a meeting in front of a large glowing globe with weird rings inside. During the meeting, they discuss the potential threat posed by the new core of the L-Zone, Mary, but figure that since she's now moving with Seed 4, aka Wiz B, she should be easier to control from the outside. Unable to sit back and watch, especially since Seed 1, Jack, is with them, they turn to one of their top members, Mr. Landry, to ask if he's finished with the preparations. At this point, Landry, also present in the meeting, assures them that Sapientia promises that all issues will be resolved once the core, aka Mary, is taken out. With that, the meeting wraps up and everyone disperses. In the next scene, Zoan and Dwan are in Copernicus, puzzled over why the rebels would want to destroy it right after taking control. Just before they get their answer, the Stingray zooms past them, and Zoan, after pulling out and staring at a certain chip, urges Dwan to follow her back to base. In another part of the moon, Jack walks into a private VIP lounge to meet Windy and Harbinger, as the eccentric commander of the Moon Chain holds an event with rebel supporters to share their plans and keep spirits high in the Moon Chain rebellion. Once he gets to the lounge, he hears the crazy fool deliver a typical opening speech before finally introducing the rebel leader, Bob Skylum, to speak. As Bob approaches the podium, Windy talks trash about the crazy commander, but falls silent when Bob takes the mic. When the speech starts, she stands up, asks Jack to share some info about his old unit, and leaves with a frown when Jack refuses to spill any vital details about the VC-3. Shortly after, Windy receives a picture of Reese and Jorg in their combat suits from an unknown contact and checks it out, wondering where they are right now. A few hours later, Mary finds Jack, who's busy playing an update of the game he used to play with Eric, on a random balcony. After getting some pointless details about the game, she apologizes for all the trouble she's caused him. Jack reassures her it's all good and then turns to Wiz B, who's always near Mary, and asks if it's okay to keep the robot close to her at all times. He knows Wiz B helps her manage the L-Zone monster, but he still thinks it's odd they're always together. Hearing this, Mary says a bit of distance is fine, and the robot starts showing off. Moving on, Mary asks Jack if he feels strange about her being the core of the L-Zone, and Jack tells her that her duty doesn't change who she is. Eventually, she asks about his relationship with Phil, and Jack finds it ironic that he, who came to the moon seeking revenge on Bob Skylum for his parents' and friends' deaths, would end up confused about who to hate. Still, he encourages Mary not to worry about him. He'll do what he needs to do eventually. Around this time, Wiz B shocks Jack in the hand and mocks him. When Jack reacts, it annoys him even more, prompting Mary to chuckle at the scene. A few dozen miles away, in Copernicus's Stadia City, Reese, Dahlia, and a few other VC3 members are seen sneaking around the streets, hoping to catch wind of anything about Moon Chain or the L-Zone's movements. Eventually, Reese overhears two guys chatting about reaching a neutral zone and makes sure to stay undercover. Meanwhile, Dahlia reports back to Lewis after asking a few refugees about the L-Zone monster's movement toward Copernicus. So far, she tells Lewis no one knows anything, and then they both look for Reese. Before they get there, they see a moon civilian mistreating some orphans from Earth who are just looking for food. Dahlia gets so angry at the jerk that she loses her cool, forgets she's undercover, and beats the daylights out of him. Soon, the others notice her skin tone and color and realize she's from Earth. Before any more damage can be done to Dahlia, Reese jumps in and knocks the other guys out. In the meantime, Windy arrives at the Moon Chain ship and asks the others if they've found the VC3 members yet. When she learns they haven't, since the VC3 members are pretty evasive, she gets upset because she's not the wait-around type, and she asks if everyone's hungry. At this point, Salamandra tells her about the moon beef they bought earlier, and Windy, excited to hear that, rushes to the table to eat. Unfortunately, she only finds Harbinger there, who has already eaten all the meat, and she scolds him for it. Just then, one of the trackers picks up a signal on the VC-3 and pulls the footage to the screen for everyone to see. Realizing how dangerous the VC-3 is, especially since they killed Pitter, the frantic commander urges them to deal with them quickly before they mess up all their plans. Right after agreeing with him, Salamandra calls Harbinger and Windy and tells them to head to Stadia City to handle the VC-3 unit stationed there. About that time, Rhys and Dahlia find themselves surrounded by angry moon citizens. Thankfully, before anything crazy happens, Lewis swoops in to rescue them. On their way back to base, Dahlia apologizes for messing up the mission, but Lewis blames Rhys for bringing someone so volatile along. Back on the Stingray, Inanna finally gets to talk to a calm Jorg for the first time since the incident. She reminds him how loudly he screamed when he saw Jorg a few days ago, and reassures him that he's still the same person he was a year ago. Hearing this, Jorg wishes he had stopped Jack last year, but when Inanna asks if he regrets not saving him, he says not at all, knowing Jack probably had his reasons. Just as he's about to say more, Inanna calls them both close friends, which annoys Jorg, and then mentions how jealous she is of what he has. Still, she warns him to stop worrying about the guy, so it doesn't cloud his judgment next time they meet. Around then, Niger reports that they're being chased, and they quickly spring into action to escape the Moonchain forces. Meanwhile, Lewis, Rhys, and Dahlia approach the Stingray vehicle on their smaller flying machines and urge Inanna to keep driving the Stingray forward as she follows them, so the enemies don't catch up. Soon after going a bit farther, Novice Harbinger shows up and destroys Rhys's flying saucer. Almost immediately, Inanna turns the Stingray around, hoping to reach Rhys and recover before she gets surrounded. Unfortunately, before they can reach her, the Moonchain ship closes in. With no other option, Inanna keeps moving forward to avoid being taken out. Before they disappear from sight, Jorg tells his team to keep his seat warm while he goes back to recover their leader, Rhys. With no one to argue with him, Jorg leaves the Stingray and retraces their steps. A few dozen meters behind, Windy and the rest of the squad finally arrive at Harbinger's location to greet their new prisoner, Rhys. Some moments before Harbinger and Windy arrive with Rhys, Jack visits Eric's grave alone at the Copernicus bottom-level district to reminisce about his life and reflect on his choices. While staring at Eric's grave, Jack's mind flashes back to his most important conversation with Phil. In this flashback, Phil listens as Jack calls him a hypocrite for preaching peace but ending up fighting and killing. When Phil gets tired of the talk, he asks Jack if he really trusts Sapientia, the AI in charge. Jack stays silent, and Phil tells him that while the people on Earth enjoy good food and clothes and follow the AI's orders like mindless robots, all the unprocessed waste and ambition gets dumped on the moon, as per Sapientia's recommendations. Phil adds that he now knows true peace will never return to the moon because all the moon's people know is conflict and strife. Even when they proposed countless peace talks to Earth, Sapientia blinded the Earthlings' minds by telling them it's impossible to create a peaceful nation through discussions. When Jack eventually asks Phil if that's why he caused the collapse of the orbital shaft, Phil denies it and tries to explain that they didn't do any of that. Before revealing the truth about the incident, Phil takes a detour and shares who they really are and what caused the incineration of the Earthlings that day. Back in the present, Windy and Harbinger, on their way back to the Moonchain base, sense something wrong about how easily they captured Rhys, especially since she is the one who killed Pitter. Realizing they need to be careful, the duo concludes that they must handle her carefully to avoid being caught off guard. At the Moonchain base, Phil is chilling with his eyes closed, recalling the day the Abaddon, the facility where he and Jack grew up, crashed into the moon. Soon after the crash, young Phil collapsed and woke up a few days later in the hands of people he didn't know. During that time, he struggled to get out of bed with his right arm gone, but when he found Wisby beside him, his gloomy face disappeared as he petted the robot. Over time, young Phil recovers and gradually accepts his new family, enjoying the time he has with them. Unfortunately, his good days were cut short when the Joint Army attacked the moon city of Copernicus, killing hundreds of civilians. Hearing the first blast, Phil rushed to the city to check the damage, but all he saw were ruthless soldiers shooting down innocent people like they were nothing. Determined to survive, young Phil ran as fast as he could away from the chaos and death, until he finally returned to the site of the Abaddon's crash after a long journey. With newfound curiosity, Phil and Wisby navigated through the dark remains of the abandoned ship to learn more about their origins. When he finally gets to the room where they were born, everything suddenly makes sense. Just as Phil snaps out of his flashback, Harbinger and Windy return with Rhys, the leader of VC-3, on board their ship. When they dock, the Moonchain soldiers strip Rhys of her engraved suit and lock her in an electrified cage. Moments later, Phil takes on the form of Bob Skylum and visits her in her cell. He praises her engraved suit before discussing the cage she's in. He suggests that it's a special cage made by the Joint Army to keep those they think are abnormal from escaping. At this point, Rhys accuses Bob of being desperate to go so far to save the people of the moon. In response, Bob accuses her and the other Earthlings of blindly threatening the moon with war based on an AI's suggestions, without questioning the AI's motives. Hearing this, Rhys refuses to let Bob's words affect her, blaming him for the deaths of millions right after the orbital shaft collapsed, and calls him a murderous terrorist pretending to be a peacemaker. Realizing Rhys might have a point, Bob accepts the accusations and leaves her in in the cell, stating that they will never see eye to eye. As he walks away from the cage, Phil, as Bob Skylum, resumes the first flashback, where he tells Jack the truth about who he really is. He reveals to Jack that he's Seed 1, the first artificial sapien species developed by Sapientia and her followers for space exploration. Jack, troubled by this, wonders if Phil is also an artificial sapien like him. Without dwelling too long, Phil happily informs him that he's Seed 2, designed to be Jack's backup. Even so, Phil explains that his genetic sequence can speed up or slow down things around him through other seeds, meaning he's not so different from other humans without the seeds nearby. When Phil mentions that a hidden command was left on their crashed ship, Abaddon, Jack loses his composure and struggles to forget the yes or no window that appeared to him during the orbital shaft's collapse. Phil continues, saying that his genetic sequence contains an electronic toxin to trigger Abaddon's self-destruction if necessary. In other words, the hidden command is a security vulnerability that activates on command and has been working quietly thanks to Phil's right hand, known as Whiz-B. After muttering a few more technical terms, Phil reveals that Sapientia is responsible for causing the orbital shaft's collapse. As the flashback pauses, we see Jack rushing toward Reese's prison cell to talk to her. Fortunately, before he arrives, Mary catches up to him, stopping him from making things worse by seeing the already distressed Reese. To help calm him down, Mary reassures him that Reese is safe in her cell, even if things deteriorate. With that, Jack finally returns to his quarters and relaxes. Moments later, Mary tells the other Moonchain commanders during their downtime that Reese and Jack are dating, and even though they deny it, it's true. This surprises the others, but they remain cautious, sensing that the Major is hiding something. For a moment, Salamandra suggests she might be on the ship to see Jacob, but Windy and the others dismiss that quickly, thinking it's unlikely. Just then, one of the traps they set off elsewhere goes off, prompting Windy and Harbinger to leave the ship in Mary's care to see what triggered the trap. Meanwhile, the other VC3 members, having lost their leader Reese, fall into depression, with many, including the emotional Dahlia and Lewis, struggling to manage their sadness. Before things go too far, Ozma stops their banter and shakes Inanna, who is lost in thought, encouraging her to say something to the group. After apologizing for spacing out, Inanna tells them to stand by while she updates the higher-ups on Reese's situation and waits for further instructions. Shortly after, Inanna gets some alone time and stares at the communications device her sister gave her earlier before leaving for a while. She wonders where her sister is at that moment. It turns out that just as her sister was about to leave the VC3 base for another assignment with Dwan, she said a few things about Jack that didn't make any sense to Inanna. When she finished talking, she handed Inanna the device and urged her to use it to contact her directly if she ran into any trouble. Inanna mentions how the device reveals their location, and Zoan jokes a bit before finally boarding her saucer. With the engines fired up and ready to go, Zoan warns her sister, Inanna, to be really careful around Reese and Jorg. Even though they're good people, they can be too straightforward, and in Zoan's experience, people like that are usually the most dangerous. After that, Zoan takes off into the moon. Remembering that precious memory, Inanna looks at the device and wonders if now would be a good time to call Zoan. Just then, Ozma shows up and startles her, but after Inanna scolds him, he starts talking about how weird Reese and Jorg are, especially Jorg for leaving his girlfriend, aka Inanna, with him just like that. Inanna gets upset because she doesn't expect to be called Jorg's girlfriend, and Ozma brings her up to speed on the moves the Joint Army plans to make the next day. Once he finishes talking, he spots the Moonchain drones hovering around the Joint Army base and does his best to hide himself and Inanna from their sight. Just then, Dahlia rushes over to tell them something, but before she can say anything, there's a tremor, and they all rush back to receive orders. Meanwhile, Zawen and Dwan are seen hacking into the Moonchain's database right after breaking into their server farm and taking out a few guards. After tinkering with the code for a while, Zoan finally manages to decode the Rebel Army's operation code, but gets shocked when she finds no information about L-Zone. Digging deeper, she discovers the hiding spots of Rebel Army operatives around town and talks about the awful memories she has of them. After sifting through more irrelevant information, she finally pulls up live footage of Reese inside a special cage at the Moonchain's base and tells Dwan about it. With everything set, Zoan gets up and encourages Dwan to follow her to rescue Reese, hoping her sister is okay. Around this time, Salamandra visits Reese in her cell, and after some small talk, asks her if she's Jack's girlfriend. Shocked, Reese shifts her gloomy expression to a nervous one and asks Salamandra if that's what Jack told her. After Salamandra shares exactly what Mary told them, she urges Reese to clarify things now since she's not the only one after Jack at that moment. She then leans dangerously close to Reese and asks again if she plans on having a happy ending with him. Reese tells Salamandra that Jack's a deserter who will face severe punishment after going through the proper procedures. Hearing this, Salamandra dismisses procedures and asks Reese to share what she truly wants in her heart, hoping she'd admit to wanting to help Jack so they could eventually plan their escape from the moon. At that moment, Reese figures out Salamandra's plan and tells her that her only goal is to complete her mission and nothing more. Realizing Reese is solely focused on her mission, Salamandra leaves the platform, calls Reese boring, and expresses hope that her plan works out for good so she'll never see Jack again in her life. To her, love is a battlefield, and since they're in real life, not a movie, Salamandra tells Reese that they don't always get what they want. With that, she wishes Reese well and leaves. Shortly after, Salamandra informs Phil that even though she confirmed confirmed Rhys plans to capture Mary, she still has something up her sleeve, so they should be careful. After hearing this, Phil thanks Salamandra for her help and soon realizes that Sapientia may have been aiding her all along. Just then, Jack storms into the room asking about Rhys. After Phil assures him that Rhys is doing just fine, he asks Jack if he's ready for what's next. Jack, who tells Phil he hates him, promises to follow through with his plan since he knows what's at stake. Right after assuring Phil he won't let him carry such a burden alone again, Jack reminds him to keep the promise they made to each other once the fighting is over. Teary eyes, Phil thanks him for his help and remembers the first time he reconnected with Jack on the day the orbital shaft collapsed. Apparently, after only seeing Jack for a few moments in that strange electronic trance world, Phil touched Jack, and almost immediately, Sapientia rebooted and pulled him back to the moon. Before getting sucked away, Phil asks Jack to lend him his strength for the sake of the moon, but then, when he returns to Sapientia's world, he teams up with Wiz B, his right hand at the time, to find a way out of that crazy world. Eventually, Bro wakes up safely in his ship, only to see Wiz B emitting smoke as it temporarily crashes from the stress. Before he knows it, various screens appear in front of him, and soon enough, Phil sees the infamous video of Bob Skylum declaring war on all of Earth right after the orbital shaft collapsed. Although that wasn't part of their plan, Phil goes along with it and does his best to stop it. At one point, he involuntarily attacks the real Bob Skylum, who begs to be killed so he can finally be free from Sapientia's control. Bob then tells him that the people of the moon need him now more than ever, especially since he's declared war on Earthlings. By this time, the real Bob tells Phil that there was never a Bob Skylum to begin with, but to keep the moon people's hope alive, he attaches his electronic necklace thing to Phil and names him the new Moon King, Bob Skylum. With this, Phil takes on his new role as the fake Bob Skylum, returns to reality, and while staring out the window, tells Jack that the new dawn for the moon begins soon. Around that time, the L-Zone monster finally arrives at Copernicus and surrounds it. Elsewhere, Harbinger and Windy are throwing fits when they reach the VC3 hideout and discover that they've already managed to escape. As if escaping wasn't enough, the VC3 left a Pegasus symbol on the wall to mark their freedom and determination. Windy freaks out upon seeing this, but calms down when one of the rebel soldiers reports finding an escape route to their hangar. Not wanting the VC3 to ruin their plans, Windy and Harbinger head out in pursuit of the VC3 soldiers. At the same time, the first HQ's fleet drops a few ballistic bombs on the L-Zone monster, which has now surrounded Copernicus City, expecting to deal some damage to it. Unfortunately, as soon as the bombs explode, the L-Zone monster turns back into one piece and keeps moving toward the city. Realizing that their explosives, supposed to be 5 times more powerful than regular ones, didn't work. Clemenza gets really frustrated trying to figure out Bob Skylum's endgame. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, the crazy commander, later identified as Commander Wise, is thrilled thinking about the look on Clemenza's face now that his last resort has failed. With no time to waste, the jerk unleashes hellfire on the first HQ's fleet, kicking off the second battle in a long time. In the meantime, Inanna and the remaining VC3 team navigate through the rundown roads and highways to get deeper into the city. Along the way, Dahlia asks Inanna, their interim captain, for instructions, but just as Inanna is about to respond, Lewis, the driver, spots Harbinger in front of them and speeds up the vehicle, hoping to run him over. As they get closer to the monster, Harbinger stops the vehicle with his bare hands, halting any movement from the VC3. Soon after, Windy and the rest of the Seed, 3 soldiers arrive to squash any resistance from the VC3 members. Back at the Moonchain base, Zoan and Duan somehow get access to Rhys's cell. After exchanging hellos, Zoan starts hacking the special cages system to free Rhys. Meanwhile, Wise is still going crazy on his ship, but Salamandra does her best to keep Mary focused, as she's understandably worried about the situation. Hearing Salamandra's comforting words, Mary reassures her that she's okay, but is more concerned about Phil and Jack, fearing something bad might happen to them. At that moment, Phil shares his worries about Jack, who is anxious to know what's going on. Phil doesn't understand why Sapientia would send Rhys to them, thinking that if Rhys's main mission is to kill Bob Skylum, it doesn't make sense for her to go after Mary. Realizing that his girlfriend would only stray from the mission based on Sapientia's orders, Jack suggests that she might be planning to use the L-Zone for something. Agreeing, Phil tells Jack that Rhys will definitely come for them, so he should be ready. Around then, Zoan finally hacks the cages system and frees Rhys. Unfortunately for Zoan, expecting gratitude, Rhys calls her and Duan traitors as she steps out of the cell. Just as Duan and Zoan are about to react, Jorg shows up, shocks Duan, and hands Rhys an engraved taser, which she uses to knock Zoan out. Once that's done, Jorg checks on her, and after Rhys assures him she's alright, he breathes a sigh of relief for finally being on the ship. At that point, Rhys remembers what she did to the Seed 3 mother organism when she arrived at the abandoned facility earlier. Upon arrival, she activates the Seed 3's mother robot and engages it in silly conversation before switching gears fighters and attacking all the bots guarding the mother robot. After dealing with the bots, Reese jumps on top of the mother bot, stabs it with a digital device, and does something very bizarre to its code. Now that she's all set and ready to activate the virus she uploaded to the Seed 3 mother bot, following Sapientia's orders, Reese formats a flash drive and plugs it into the Moonchain Command's mainframe. After running a few lines of code, she successfully hacks into the command system of all Seed 3 robots and turns them against the Moonchain warriors. Suddenly, the attack robots that were controlled by the Moonchain start attacking their own allies. In the chaos, Windy gets kicked into a building by one of the attack bots, but when she's about to go back out to fight the VC3 and the Seed 3 bots, she sees some civilians hiding inside and asks why they haven't been evacuated yet. The kids tell her it's because they have nowhere else to go. Realizing what's at stake, Windy destroys the attack bot that followed her in and tells Harbinger and the other human guards to lead the civilians to safety underground. For a moment, Harbinger leaves Ozma and the others to help the civilians. During the evacuation, an attack bot overpowers the human soldier guarding the kids and nearly kills them. Thankfully, Inanna steps up and shoots the robot before anyone gets hurt, wondering why the bots are turning on them. As Phil, Jack, and the others are about to leave the base, Jorg and Reese arrive, and Reese shoots at them just as they're closing the hangar. She recognizes Phil as the guy from the church and keeps a straight face. Phil orders her to explain what she did to the Seed 3 mother, and Reese tells him they don't owe him any explanation. Just then, Jorg tells Jack to hand Mary over, with Reese threatening to use force if they don't comply. But when Jack and Phil refuse to let them in, Reese shoots the hangar open and pushes past them to look for Mary. Jack immediately goes after her, leaving Phil to deal with Jorg and the other bots. At this time, Salamandra is just about to take off from Copernicus when suddenly, the attack bots holding onto the ship make a hole in the window. As Jack is about to catch up to Reese, an attack bot blocks his path in the corridor. Frustrated with the annoying robot, Jack destroys it easily. Shortly after, Reese finally reaches Mary deep inside the ship and shoots at her without remorse. Thankfully, with Whizbee on her arm, Mary isn't hurt, but she tries to calm Reese down so they can talk. Unfortunately, Reese is too far gone and keeps trying to kill Mary. When Whizbee finally fights back, Reese finds herself dodging its dangerous laser beams. Soon after, Jack reaches them, but before they can discuss anything, Salamandra loses control of the ship due to the ongoing attacks from the bots and crashes into the outer wall of Copernicus City. Back in the chaotic streets, Inanna and the others in VC3 are left wondering why the attack bots are targeting the moon's people. For a moment, they think maybe this is the Moonchain's way of showing their true colors. Inanna and the others spot Windy and Harbinger battling the bots with all their strength, cursing Sapientia for causing this mess however they can. Just as an attack bot is about to take them down, Ozma protects them, saying that while his mission is to capture them, he and his teammates can't ignore what's happening in front of them. They continue to chatter meaningless nonsense, which annoys Windy, so she tells them that the chaos they see was caused by none other than Sapientia herself. This surprises Inanna and the others, but before they dismiss Windy's claims as nonsense, Zoan tells her sister through the communication device that Windy is telling the truth. A few minutes after the Moonchain ship crashes, Salamandra wakes up and, even though she's banged up, keeps going with the mission. Meanwhile, Jack is carrying his beautiful young partner, Reese, across the soft moon sand when he sees two attack robots grabbing Mary and trying to pull Whizbee off her arm. Jack feels helpless as he watches the bots not only rip Whizbee from Mary's hand, but also momentarily disable the bot. Just as he's about to jump in and save her, Georg shows up and holds him back. Around that time, Zoan talks to Inanna and the rest of the VC3 team about ignoring Sapientia's orders and doing the right thing, which is protecting their friends and family. Jorg, who won't let Jack go, tells him to let Sapientia handle it so they can move on and be better people. But just before the attack bots finish Mary off, Phil shoots them down and collapses after seeing how bad things are with Mary and Whizbee. At that moment, Reese gets dangerously close to Mary, points her gun at the struggling girl, and after saying she's spent her whole life obeying Sapientia, she tearfully asks Jack why he would leave her without saying anything. With no answer, Reese turns to Mary and gets ready to take the life of an innocent girl. Remembering all the sweet moments she's shared with Mary, tears stream down her face as she finally stops herself from going through with it, following Sapientia's orders. Then, she turns to Jack, crying, and asks what he must think of her. Just then, out of nowhere, Sapientia hacks into Reese's suit and forces a prosthetic arm on her, which makes Reese aim her pistol at a panicking Mary. As she screams to be saved from the crazy AI, Reese accidentally shoots Mary. The moment Mary gets shot, Elzone starts acting erratically, and Commander Wise notices the change, wondering what's going to happen next. Meanwhile, Jack rushes over to check on Reese, who's frozen in place, and Mary, whose body is starting to go haywire. Just before she explodes, poor Mary looks at Jack and Phil one last time, apologizes for what's about to happen, and tells them to run for their lives. Then, she unleashes a massive field of energy that turns the entire L-Zone monster red. This color change triggers a violent reaction from the L-Zone monster as the mass of red goo rushes towards Mary and carries the unconscious girl away from her friends. Unable to do anything, Jack and the others witness the large L-Zone attack and do their best to take down as many joint army ships as they can. Realizing the danger, Wise orders the Moonchain fleet to retreat to safety before they get crushed by the furious monster. Soon after, the L-Zone monster manages to break through Copernicus city's defenses and attacks every living being inside. As the war rages on the moon, the Council of Sapientian Elders gathers to discuss the creativity and potential of the L-Zone, noting how it transforms humanity to fit its desires, like the E2 material. Regardless, things won't go as planned for the moon chain, yet they all agree that terraforming is essential for the development of the ever-growing human species. While Phil and the others wonder where the L-Zone took Mary, Jack approaches Reese and uses his engraving tech to destroy the prosthetic hand created by Sapientia on Reese. After Jack does this, Phil checks on him, and Jack reassures him that he's okay. Once Jorg is put in charge of caring for Reese, Phil and Jack discover where Mary is being held. For a moment, Jack suspects the monster is trying to evolve. However, before he can confirm this, Salamandra arrives in her vehicle and urges them to get on, so they can all go together to save Mary and the moon. Realizing they can't leave it at that, Phil and Whizbee jump into action while Jack stays behind, hugs Reese, and promises to return once he's saved the world. Reese smiles and wishes him luck. With everything ready, Jack gears up, hops on Phil's vehicle, and rides with his childhood buddy to Mary's location. Just before they reach her, something strange happens to the Seed 3 mother robot back at the abandoned facility, causing her to shut down momentarily. This triggers a chain reaction that disables other rogue attack bots, creating some breathing room between Phil and the L-Zone monster. By this time, Reese finally regains her normal self and fights the other attack bots alongside Jorg and Salamandra, who surprisingly take down the bots with ease. After they handle the bots, Salamandra calls Harbinger and Windy to notify them that the L-Zone has not only gone haywire, but has also hidden Mary in a core high up in the Copernicus orbital shaft. Once they confirm they can hear her, Salamandra unexpectedly patches Reese and Jorg into the call, allowing them to hear Windy and Harbinger complain about how wild the Seed 3 attack bots are, preventing their evacuation. Hearing this, Salamandra informs everyone that since Phil and Jack are on their way, she'll need a favor from them. As she explains this, Jack and Phil continue shooting at the incoming attack robots, hoping to get closer to Mary. Realizing the bots are overwhelming, Jack calls in a favor from Wise, who, after complaining about being busy, sends down some bullets onto the bots, attacking Phil and Jack's vehicle. After driving a bit further through the L-Zone monster, Phil and Jack finally receive a signal from the end of the shaft. Determined to reach it, Phil accelerates the vehicle and drives as fast as he can with Jack behind him. As they approach the entrance of the orbital shaft, Duan alerts Zoan about Jack's arrival, prompting the hacker to speed up her efforts so she can handle the attack bots before they stall Phil and Jack's mission. While she works, Phil and Jack leap off their vehicle and take to the skies to reach the end of the shaft on time. Meanwhile, the L-Zone monster and the attack bots do their best to stop them, but thankfully, with Windy and Harbinger's assistance, Phil and Jack manage to move past the threats with ease. Once Phil and Jack get past their level, they run into another batch of attack bots and mini L-Zone monsters. This time, Inanna and Ozma show up to help and make them promise to listen to the complaints later. As they keep climbing towards the top, Zoan finally finishes her hack, and after hitting the enter button, she disables the Seed 3 mother bot and the other attack bots, causing trouble for everyone. Right after the attack bots collapse, Phil lifts Jack up to give him a much-needed boost to reach Mary's level way faster. While Jack flies up, Phil makes sure to take out all the L-Zone tentacles coming at them. Eventually, Jack reaches the end of the orbital shaft and gets close to Mary. He breaks the protective cocoon, keeping her inside the core, and goes in further to find Mary unconscious, suspended in some kind of organic pod-like substance. He touches her and suddenly enters the trance that Mary's consciousness is in, only to see that she's stuck in another glowing circle. Jack moves closer to her, waking her consciousness, and they touch hands. The moment their hands connect, a reaction happens outside the cocoon, making the L-Zone monster mass crystallize. Wise declares the war is over and wonders what will happen next. Moments later, after the crystallization finishes, Jack finds Phil somewhere on the orbital shaft and apologizes for not turning the moon green with Mary this time. Still, he tells Phil he feels at peace now that it's all done. Phil agrees, and just then, Mary wakes up. Phil explains everything to her. So far, the L-Zone monster is gone, and thanks to her, they can finally start fresh. While she processes all this, Whizbee, her favorite companion, appears and starts joking with her. Eventually, the war wraps up, and Phil finally surrenders to the joint army. Before leaving the moon, he thanks Mary for all her help and asks her to look after Jack while he's gone. Once Mary agrees, Phil gets handcuffed and walks through the army of guards to the secure vehicle. On his way to what feels like hell, Phil wishes he could escape prison in this lifetime so he and Jack can be buddies again and hang out like friends do. Inside the vehicle, Phil keeps rambling but soon ends with something about how the revolution isn't really over yet. Finally, the vehicle takes Filiosio to the Joint Army HQ in Nevada. When Reese and the other VC3 members get back to base, Reese and Clemenza both quit their jobs to become normal people again. During one of their last moments together, Reese asks Clemenza if he knows what will happen to Phil after his hearing, but Clemenza, now an ex-commander, says they don't know what might happen to Phil in the end, and they might not even see him again. After that, he asks Reese about her discharge, and Reese reassures him that she's ready to move forward. For his hearing, Phil is made to stand in Sapientia's meeting room, chained and surrounded by the elders, so they can discuss his crime and issue his sentence. Right after naming all the crimes he's committed against Earth and the Moon, Landry calls Phil Seed 2, and identifies him as the final risk factor that needs to be eliminated. Before they decide on his punishment, Phil asks if they think the AI, Sapientia, hates humanity. In response, the elders say the AI grew tired of loving humans, as managing 15 billion of them must have been stressful. One follower describes Sapientia's actions as a comprehensive response, then tells Phil that all their troubles will end with his elimination. Hearing this, Phil chuckles and, noticing how close he is to Sapientia, reveals his seed butterflies as his secret weapon. Before anyone can react, he breaks free from his restraints and has his butterflies self-destruct. To protect itself, Sapientia fires lasers all over the room, hoping to kill the butterflies, but instead ends up killing Phil and its followers. In his final moments, Phil leaves the new world in Jack's hands and succumbs to his injuries. Sometime after the explosion that took down Sapientia, Earth fell into chaos without guidance, but the Moon Chain warriors managed to maintain peace on the moon. 3 months later, Mary finds Jack on a random balcony in Copernicus and asks if he's nervous about what he's about to do. Although he doesn't seem nervous, Jack tells her he's not feeling that great. Eventually, he complains about going back to Earth, and Mary quickly ushers him inside, since it's already time for the big event to start. Around that time, Wendy enters the VIP area and sees Zoan and Duan relaxing and snacking while they wait. She freaks out for a moment, but Zoan reassures her to calm down because they'll be buddies soon. Just then, Salamandra and Harbinger walk in, and somehow, Harbinger becomes friends with Duan without even talking to him. When they all get serious, Zoan expresses her condolences about Phil to Salamandra, who assures her that Phil still lives in their hearts. Soon after, Bob Skylum steps up to the podium and shows his face to all the moon citizens watching. Just before he speaks, though, he changes his appearance to Jack's and, as the crowd murmurs, introduces himself as Jacob Shadow, shares his revenge mission regarding the moon, and delivers a speech they'll never forget. In short, Jack tells them that the Moon King is no more. From now on, the moon will be ruled by every citizen there. With that said, Jack urges everyone to avoid fighting each other and chants the name of the rebel army, Moonrise, with the others. After his speech, Jack returns to Mary, who shares some encouraging words, thanks him sincerely, and promises to help the moon rise again. The next day, Jack visits his friend's grave, and while observing a minute of silence, gets a strange friend request in his game from someone named Phil. In the final scene, Jack smiles at the pop-up message and accepts the friend request.